I flew across the country for my dad's birthday, only to be told I wasn't invited, so I cashed out on my entire family. 3 days later, I woke up to 53 missed calls. You know how they say family is forever? Yeah, turns out family is forever, until you're 2,000 miles away with a bank account they need. Buckle up, bros. This is going to be a wild ride. So I, 28 male, have been helping my old man financially for about 6+ years now. Not because I'm some pushover, but because we actually had a decent relationship back then. He worked his ass off raising me after mom split when I was 12, picked up extra shifts, never missed my games, the whole deal. When I landed my first solid job after college, I took an opportunity with a tech company in Boston, about 2,500 miles from my hometown in Arizona. The money was insane compared to local options, and Dad was actually the one who pushed me to take it. "Don't worry about me. Go make something of yourself," he said. So I did. It started with reasonable stuff. His truck needed repairs, and he was between jobs. The medical bills after his knee surgery when his insurance didn't cover everything. That kind of thing. He was always super grateful, promised to pay me back, though we both knew that wasn't really the point, and never made it weird. I remember the first time I helped him out. His ancient Ford F-150, the same one he'd taught me to drive in, had finally given up the ghost. Transmission was shot, and the quote from the mechanic might as well have been written in another language based on how pale he got looking at it. $2,800. For a guy who was working construction between more stable gigs, it might as well have been $28,000. "I'll figure something out," he told me over the phone, that stubborn pride in his voice. "Maybe my buddy can give me rides to work for a while until I save up." His buddy, who lived 30 minutes in the opposite direction. The math didn't math. So I called the mechanic myself from my apartment in Boston, put it on my credit card, and texted Dad. "Truck will be ready Thursday. Consider it payback for all those 5 a.m. hockey practices you drove me to." When I flew home for Christmas that year and saw him, he actually had tears in his eyes. Hugged me tight, promised he'd pay me back every cent. I told him not to worry about it. The look on his face was payment enough. For the first few years, this arrangement worked fine. I was making good money at my tech job in Boston. He was there for me with phone calls of advice and support, and it felt like we had a solid father-son thing going despite the distance. I even helped him with the down payment on his house because, honestly, I was proud to be in a position where I could do that. He'd spent decades in a crappy apartment so I could have what I needed growing up. I'd fly home for major holidays and occasionally a long weekend, and those visits actually meant something. The house wasn't anything fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch style in a decent neighborhood. But man, you'd have thought I'd bought him a mansion from how excited he was. He kept sending me pictures of each room as he fixed it up. "Finally have a proper garage," he texted with a picture of his tools all organized on the wall. I flew home every few months when I could. We'd grill in the backyard, watch the game, and he'd show me his latest home improvement project. He'd always pick me up from the airport himself, no matter what time my flight landed. Those were good times. Real good times. Then he met her, the stepmom. Look, I tried to like her. Really did. She seemed nice enough at first, but it became clear pretty fast that her lifestyle expectations were, let's just say, ambitious. Suddenly, Dad was talking about renovations and vacations and upgrading everything from his wardrobe to his car. She was about 5 years younger than him, with the bleached blonde hair and the too loud laugh, always dressed like she was heading to a fancy brunch, even when we were just hanging out at the house. Within 3 months of dating, she'd convinced Dad that the kitchen absolutely needed new granite countertops. The perfectly functional counters that had been there since he bought the place? Outdated, apparently. And somehow I kept getting looped into funding these essential improvements. The occasional help gradually turned into regular financial support. Dad started calling more often, but our conversations got shorter unless they involved money. Still, I kept helping because I'd convinced myself it was just a rough patch. The calls changed too. It used to be, "Hey son, how's that project going at work?" Or, "Did you catch the game last night?" Now it was, "Hey bud, got a minute?" Which was code for, "I need something." Then there's my brother. We've never been particularly close, but we were always civil. He moved back in with Dad after dropping out of college, supposedly to find himself, which apparently involved a lot of gaming and very little job hunting. Whenever I'd visit, he'd make these little comments about how lucky I was to have a good job, like my degree and 60-hour work weeks had nothing to do with it. My brother is 2 years younger than me, where I took after Dad, practical, hardworking, likes sports. He was always more like Mom, artistic, restless, convinced he was meant for something special. Maybe that's why Dad always cut him more slack. But while I was working my way through college with student loans and part-time jobs, He was partying his way through his freshman year on Dad's dime. When he dropped out, claiming college was too restrictive for his creative process, I bit my tongue. My brother's creative process mostly seemed to involve playing League of Legends until 4 a.m. and sleeping until noon. When I'd visit, he'd barely acknowledge me, except to ask if I could spot him some cash until his next gigs that mysteriously never materialized. The real shift happened gradually. The grateful "thanks, son, I don't know what I'd do without you" became "we were counting on this." The occasional request became monthly expectations. The appreciation faded, replaced by a weird sense of entitlement to my money. Like the time I flew home for Thanksgiving and noticed Dad's new 75-inch smart TV mounted on the wall. "Nice upgrade," I said, remembering the 55-inch I'd helped him pick out during my last visit. "Patricia found it on sale," he shrugged. "Been meaning to tell you the property taxes went up this year. Gonna be about $1,500 more than we thought." No connection between the two expenditures seemed to register with him. And weirdly, for the first time ever, Dad didn't pick me up from the airport that trip, said his knee was acting up. Yet there he was, perfectly mobile, showing off how he'd mounted the TV himself. But I still wasn't seeing the full picture. Family loyalty is a hell of a drug. Anyways, 2 months ago, Dad called about his upcoming 65th birthday. "Milestone birthday," he said. "Time to celebrate," he said. "I've been thinking about doing something special," he told me, sounding genuinely excited for the first time in months. "Nothing crazy, just family and close friends at the Grand Hotel downtown." I was actually happy to hear him sounding like his old self. That Grand Hotel isn't cheap. We're talking at least $250 per head for a private event. But if it meant seeing Dad enjoying himself like he used to, it seemed worth it. "Send me the details," I said. "I'd love to help make it happen." He practically gushed with gratitude. Started talking about how meaningful it would be to have everyone together, how he couldn't wait to catch up with me properly, how this would be the start of a better year. "It's been too long since we really talked," he said, and for the first time in ages, he sounded like my dad again, the one who used to call just to check in, not to ask for something. "I miss that," he said. I missed it too. Maybe this was the turning point we needed. Over the next few weeks, I transferred enough to cover the venue, a cool $12,000, helped pick menu options over the phone, even gave input on the music selection. Dad kept me in the loop about everything. Who was coming, the schedule, all of it. "Aunt S is flying in from Phoenix," he texted one day. "Uncle R and his new wife are coming too. Family I hadn't seen in years." This was shaping up to be quite the event. "This is going to be great," he texted. "Everyone's excited." I should have noticed he never actually said, "I'm excited to see you there." But I was busy at work, and it felt good to be involved in something that seemed to make him happy. For a minute there, it felt like we were rebuilding our relationship. I didn't receive a formal invitation, but why would I? I was helping plan the damn thing. Of course I'd be there. I booked a cross-country flight, took 3 days off work, and reserved a hotel room near the venue. The day before, I texted him to confirm the time as I was packing my suitcase, and he responded with "doors open at 7, dinner at 8. No mention of meeting up beforehand, offering to pick me up from the airport or anything. But I didn't think much of it. I even bought a new suit for the occasion. Charcoal gray Tom Ford that set me back nearly $2,000. I'm not usually a brand guy, but this was a special occasion. First time I'd be seeing some extended family in years. And after a 5-hour flight, I wanted to at least look good while fighting the jet lag. Wanted to make a good impression. The morning of the big day, I sent a quick, "looking forward to tonight" text. No response, but Dad was probably busy with last-minute preparations. I got a haircut, picked up my freshly tailored suit, even splurged on some fancy cologne. This was going to be the reset our relationship needed. My flight landed at 4:30, giving me just enough time to grab my rental car, check into the hotel, shower off the airplane grime, and get dressed. Driving through my old hometown felt strange. I'd flown 2,500 miles for this. Spent a small fortune on airfare, hotel, car rental, and that suit. But it would all be worth it to finally reconnect with Dad and the extended family I rarely saw anymore. I showed up to the hotel right at 7, looking sharp and feeling pretty good. The place looked amazing. Elegant decorations, professional staff, open bar. Exactly what you'd expect for the price tag. The Grand Hotel is the fanciest place in our city. Old school luxury with modern touches, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, staff who somehow always know exactly when you need something. The kind of place where even the bathroom attendant looks like he makes more than you do. Walking through that lobby, I felt a twinge of pride. Dad deserved a nice celebration, and I was glad I could help make it happen. I was looking forward to finally having some quality time with him after months of mostly financial conversations. What I wasn't expecting was the woman with the clipboard at the entrance to the ballroom. Name? She asked with professional courtesy. I gave her my name and mentioned I was the birthday man's son. She scanned her list, flipped to another page, then looked up with that practiced customer service smile. I'm sorry, sir. I don't see your name on the guest list. I laughed, assuming there had been some kind of clerical error. There must be a mistake. I helped organize this whole event. Let me double check with the event coordinator, she said, stepping away to speak into her headset. I stood there, not particularly worried yet, watching guests stream past me into the ballroom. I recognized family friends, cousins I hadn't seen in years, even Dad's old bowling buddies. My cousin Trent nodded as he walked by with his wife. Nice suit, man, he said, giving me a fist bump before heading in. Then a staff member approached. Are you with one of the vendors? Checking on the catering, perhaps? No, I said, still calm. I'm his son. I actually helped plan this whole thing. Oh, he said, looking uncomfortable. Just a moment. As I waited, I texted Dad. I'm at the door, but there seems to be an issue with the guest list. No response. 5 minutes passed. 10. Through the open doors, I could see the party in full swing. The room looked amazing, and everyone seemed to be having a great time, laughing and catching up. Finally, Dad appeared with my brother trailing behind him. Dad was wearing a new suit I'd never seen, and my brother had that smug look he gets when he thinks he's about to witness some drama. Hey, Dad said, with none of the warmth I'd expected. Didn't think you'd actually show up? I blinked, confused. What? I helped plan this whole thing. Of course I'm here. Dad glanced around, lowering his voice. Look, we decided to keep tonight small. Family only. The words hit like a slap. I am family, I said, keeping my voice level. What are you talking about? You know what he means, my brother chimed in. Real family. The ones who are actually here for him. Not just sending money from across the country and showing up twice a year. Jake was wearing what looked like a new dress shirt and designer jeans, probably paid for with the money I'd sent Dad last month for the urgent plumbing issue. I looked between them, reality slowly dawning. Are you serious right now? I paid for this entire event. The venue, the food, everything. Dad had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. And we appreciate that. But tonight's about celebrating without any complications. Complications, I repeated. That's what I am now? Dad sighed like I was being difficult. You know things have been strained. We thought it would be better this way. Less awkward for everyone. One of the waitstaff was hovering nearby, clearly pretending not to listen while catching every word. Young guy, probably college age, straightening already perfect place settings at the table closest to us. And standing just inside the doorway, watching this whole interaction, was my stepmom. She was decked out in what had to be a brand new outfit, complete with jewelry that definitely wasn't from a department store. When she caught my eye, she quickly turned away, pretending to be fascinated by a conversation with my aunt. I took a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't accomplish anything, but I wasn't about to slink away either. Not after flying across the country, not after funding this entire charade. You know what? I said calmly. I think I'll stay. Dad's eyes widened slightly. Look, son. No, you look, I said, keeping my voice steady but firm. I flew 2,500 miles to be here. I paid $12,000 for this venue. I'm going in. My brother stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. Dad said, I don't care what Dad said, I replied, not backing down. I care what I did, which was make this entire night possible. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Want to see the transfer? Want to call the event manager over and ask who paid the deposit? Because I'm happy to clear that up right now. My brother scoffed. Always about money with you, isn't it? I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer audacity. That's rich coming from the guy who hasn't paid his own phone bill in 3 years. Tell me, how's that creative process going? Reached level 100 in League yet? He flushed red, but didn't have a comeback. Funny how people who leech off others never seem to have a good defense when called out directly. Dad tried another approach. Son, please, it's my birthday. Oh, I'm well aware, I cut in. I have the credit card statement to prove it, along with statements for the last 6 birthdays, Christmases, and that time you absolutely needed a new fishing boat because, and I quote, it would help with your depression. How's that working out, by the way? Because from where I'm standing, seems like the only thing that was depressed was my bank account. The waiter who'd been pretending not to listen was now openly watching, a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. I caught his eye. Excuse me, I said. Could you please tell my aunt, the one talking to that blonde with more filler than personality, that her nephew would like to speak with her outside? Just say it's about a surprise for my dad. My aunt's always had a soft spot for me, that's why I called her. My pleasure, sir, he replied with a knowing look that suggested he'd worked enough family events to recognize drama when he saw it. What are you doing? Dad hissed. Getting back up, I said simply. Or did you think I was going to just hand over 12 grand and slink back to Boston without even getting a slice of cake? That's not how investments work, Dad. Even bad ones. My stepmom had noticed the commotion and was watching nervously from inside, clutching her designer purse like I might try to repossess it. Not a bad idea, actually, considering I probably paid for it. You're making a scene, my brother muttered. No, I'm standing in a hallway having a conversation, I replied. A scene would be me walking in there and announcing to everyone that the open bar they're enjoying was courtesy of the son who wasn't good enough to invite. But don't worry, I'm not going to do that. I paused. Yet! My aunt appeared moments later, face lighting up when she saw me. There you are! We were wondering when you'd arrive. She hugged me tightly, then looked confused at the tension in the air. What's going on? Apparently I'm not on the guest list, I said calmly, for the party I paid for. Her smile fell. What? Dad was just explaining how I'm not real family because I live in Boston. You know, the job I took so I could afford to fund his retirement and my brother's gaming addiction. My aunt's eyes narrowed as she looked between Dad and me. Is this true? She asked him. Dad looked trapped. It's complicated. It's really not, I interrupted. Either I'm welcome at a party I organized and funded, or I'm not. And if I'm not, I think everyone inside should know exactly what kind of celebration they're enjoying. I'm thinking a toast would be appropriate, don't you? Dad blanched. He knew I had receipts, literal and figurative. You wouldn't, my brother said, but he sounded uncertain. Try me, I replied. I've got nothing to lose at this point. You guys made sure of that when you decided I wasn't family enough to attend, but was definitely family enough to foot the bill. Kind of like how I wasn't family enough to be invited to Thanksgiving last year, but was family enough to pay for stepmom's emergency root canal the next week. Funny how that works. My aunt looked stunned. Of course you're welcome. This is ridiculous. She linked her arm through mine. You're coming in with me, right now. Aunt, maybe we should discuss this privately, my brother started. Oh, I think we're done discussing, she cut in with a tone that brooked no argument. My aunt had always been a force of nature. Your brother flew across the country and paid for this entire event. He's coming in. My brother started to protest, but Dad cut him off with a look. He knew when he was cornered. Fine, he muttered. But don't make a scene. I'm not the one who created this scene, I replied, walking past him with my aunt. I'm just the one who refused to be the punchline. As we entered, I saw several heads turn. The whispers started immediately. My stepmom's face fell when she realized I was coming in. My aunt, bless her, made sure to walk me right up to her. Look who I found being turned away at the door, she said loudly. Can you believe someone forgot to put his name on the guest list after he arranged everything? My stepmom's smile was so stiff, it looked like it might crack her foundation. Oh, what a terrible oversight. So glad you could make it. Wouldn't have missed it for the world, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Nice necklace, by the way. Reminds me of the one I saw when my credit card statement showed a charge at Tiffany's last Christmas. What a coincidence. She touched the diamond pendant nervously. Your father has excellent taste. Yes, in jewelry. Not so much in party guests, apparently. I turned away before she could respond and headed for the bar. If I was going to get through this evening, I needed a soda. Maybe with a little umbrella in it, just to mark the occasion. What's really going on? My aunt whispered as we walked through the crowd. 6 years of financial abuse followed by the ultimate slap in the face, I said under my breath. I've sent them almost $250,000, and they tried to keep me out of a party I literally paid for. Her eyes widened. $250,000. Yes, I've got all the receipts. Every transfer, every text, every broken promise to pay it back when things stabilize. Jesus Christ, she breathed. And tonight? Just the icing on the cake. They didn't think I'd actually show up. Thought they could take the money and have their perfect party without the inconvenience of my presence. She squeezed my arm. What are you going to do? I smiled grimly. I'm going to enjoy the party I paid for. Stay close to me, she said. I've got your back. For the next hour, I circulated through the party, calm and composed on the outside while my mind was racing. Every time someone said, amazing party, or your dad must be so happy, I just smiled and replied with gems like, he should be, cost enough to put a down payment on a house, or nothing but the best for dad, that's my motto, and his apparently when it's on my dime. I caught my aunt talking intensely with a couple other relatives, occasionally looking my way. Word was spreading. My uncle caught my eye from across the room and raised his glass in silent solidarity. Then he deliberately turned his back on my dad. Small gestures. But they didn't go unnoticed. My phone buzzed with a text from my aunt. Told your uncles what happened. They're pissed. Uncle R wants details about the money. Also, your cousin is sitting with your brother to keep him from making a scene. Team U is assembling. I smiled at that. Team U. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this family as I thought. I noticed my dad watching me nervously from across the room, clearly waiting for me to cause a scene. My brother had stationed himself protectively near the DJ booth, as if I might try to hijack the music. If he only knew what I was actually planning. My stepmom kept trying to steer important guests away from me whenever I got close, which was honestly hilarious to watch. Oh, you must see the photo display over here, she'd say loudly, practically dragging people away mid-conversation. I played it cool, biding my time. I knew exactly when my moment would come. I wasn't going to waste the chance to say my piece, not after flying 2,500 miles and spending 6 years being the family piggy bank. The DJ caught my eye and nodded slightly. The cake was being wheeled in. Showtime. Dinner was winding down. The cake was being prepared in the kitchen. According to the schedule I had literally planned, it was almost time for toasts. The DJ announced, and now, some words from family and friends to celebrate our guest of honor. A few people spoke. Dad's bowling buddy told a story about their glory days. His sister shared a childhood memory. My stepmom gushed about what an amazing man he was, and how lucky she felt. Then, before my brother could grab the microphone as planned, my aunt stood up. I believe my nephew has something to say, she announced, looking directly at me. After all, he made this whole evening possible. There was a smattering of applause as I walked to the front. Dad looked like he was about to have a heart attack. My stepmom was frantically whispering to my brother, who started to stand up but was yanked back down by my uncle. I took the microphone, smiled, and raised my glass. I'd like to propose a toast to my father on his 65th birthday, I began smoothly. Dad, our relationship has changed a lot over the years. I've been thinking about how to mark this occasion, and I realized the best gift I could give you is honesty. I paused, looking around the room. When Dad called me about this party, I was thrilled. I was happy to help plan it, happy to cover the entire $12,000 cost of the venue and catering, happy to fly across the country to be here. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people looked confused. What many of you might not know is that for the past 6 years, I've been helping Dad financially. It started with small things. His truck needed repairs, there were medical bills. That was no problem. I was glad to help the man who raised me. I pulled out my phone. But over time, the requests grew. The gratitude shrank. Dad and my stepmom began to expect regular financial support from me. I looked directly at Dad now. In total, over the past 6 years, I've given you $237,482. I have every transfer documented. Every text where you promised it was just until things settle down. Every email thanking me for the temporary help that somehow became permanent. The room was dead silent now. Despite all this, when I showed up tonight, after flying across the country, taking time off work, buying a new suit, I was told I wasn't on the guest list. I was told I wasn't real family, just the ATM funding the lifestyle you see around you. I gestured to the elegant room. So happy birthday, Dad. My gift to you is the truth. Everyone here now knows exactly who paid for this party. Everyone knows exactly how you treat your own son. I raised my glass higher. To clarity, to reality, and to finally being free of financial exploitation, disguised as family obligation. I took a sip and set down my glass. The silence was absolute. Then I turned to the room. Enjoy the rest of the evening, everyone. The cake is excellent. I picked the flavor myself during the planning calls. I walked calmly toward the exit. As I passed my aunt, she squeezed my shoulder in silent support. My uncle gave me a solemn nod. Behind me, chaos erupted. My stepmom was on her feet, shouting that I was lying. My brother was trying to grab the microphone. Dad just sat there, staring at his plate. But I didn't look back. I walked out with my head high, the weight of 6 years finally off my shoulders. In the days that followed, the fallout was predictable. Dad's messages evolved from furious to desperate as the financial reality set in. Stepmom was suddenly re-evaluating their relationship, now that the money train had derailed. My brother had to deal with Dad's increasing panic about bills. How could you do this to me? After everything I've done for you? This is a massive misunderstanding. Call me. The mortgage is due next week. I thought we had an understanding. Then, stepmom's talking about moving out. Is that what you wanted? I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet. Please, son. I read each message but responded to none. 6 years of being manipulated and used had been more than enough. Family members I barely knew started reaching out. Some to criticize me for humiliating Dad, others to quietly admit they'd suspected something wasn't right for years. My cousin called. Look, I've got to ask. Was all that stuff you said true? Every single word, I said. Every dollar, every broken promise. Jesus, he muttered. I always wondered how Uncle was affording all that stuff on his pension, but I figured maybe he had investments or something. His only investment was me, I said. For what it's worth, he said, before hanging up. I think you got screwed over. Bad. My aunt, Dad's sister, left a voicemail. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I always knew something wasn't right with that woman. Your father was never like this before her. Call me if you need anything. I appreciated the support, but it came too late. Where were these people when Dad was draining my accounts for years? Why had no one questioned how a retired construction worker was suddenly living like he had a six-figure income? The most surprising call came from my uncle, Dad's brother, who I'd always thought didn't like me much. I saw what happened at the party, he said gruffly. Your old man was out of line. Thanks for backing me up in there, I said. The look on your stepmom's face when you dropped that number, priceless. Your dad should have never let it get to that point. No, he shouldn't have, I agreed. Your grandfather was a real piece of work, you know, my uncle continued. Used your dad as free labor in his business for years, promised him partnership, then sold the company without giving him a dime. Your dad swore he'd never be like that with his own kids. The irony wasn't lost on me. Guess some patterns are hard to break. Maybe, my uncle said, but you broke it. Good for you. I responded to none of Dad's increasingly desperate texts. Instead, I took the money I'd been setting aside for Dad's next inevitable emergency, a cool $10,000 that was earmarked for whatever crisis would surely arise, and booked a trip I'd been putting off for years. I didn't even bother flying back to Boston first, changed my return flight to Portland, and spent 2 weeks backpacking through national parks in the Pacific Northwest. No phone, no emails, no family drama, just me, nature, and the freedom of knowing that my finances were my own again. When I got back, tanned and more at peace than I'd been in years, there was a letter in my mailbox, handwritten from Dad. Son, I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was wrong on every level. The party was stepmom's idea. She thought having you there would be awkward after you and I argued about the kitchen remodel. I should have stood up to her. I should have stood up for you. The truth is, I've been drowning for years. First in debt, then in lies to cover that debt. It was so easy to lean on you because you never said no. Never made me feel small for asking. And I took advantage of that in the worst way. Stepmom left last week, took what she could carry and cleared out our joint account. Your brother's furious with both of us. You for cutting off the money, me for not having a backup plan. He's moving in with friends next month. I've put the house on the market. It's too much for me anyway, and I need to start paying you back. I know it will take the rest of my life to make things right financially, but I have to try. I miss who we used to be. I miss who I used to be before I became this person I don't recognize. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No expectations, no requests, just a dad who failed his son and hopes someday to make amends. Love always, Dad. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Maybe someday I'd be ready to talk to him again. Maybe I'd even be able to forgive him. But not today. Today, I was calling a financial advisor to set up a retirement account for myself. Today, I was finally putting myself first. People ask if I regret how things went down. I don't. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. I helped because I genuinely wanted to. Because I remembered the dad who worked double shifts to buy me baseball equipment and drove me to college in our beat-up truck. But that man is gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM, willing to exclude me from a celebration I paid for because my actual presence wasn't valuable to him, just my wallet. Sometimes the clearest way to show someone their behavior is to simply hold up a mirror. No sneaking around, no elaborate schemes. Just standing tall, looking them in the eye, and speaking your truth. And sometimes, the best birthday gift you can give is the gift of reality. At my graduation dinner, I watched my mom slip something into my glass. I smiled, stood up, and handed it to my golden child brother. He drank every drop. What happened next destroyed their empire. Hey Reddit, my parents tried to poison me at my own graduation dinner, so I gave the glass to my golden child brother instead. He drank it. Then I burned their entire pharmaceutical empire to the ground. Buckle up because this one's a ride. I'm Nate, 23 male, and I just graduated with a degree in environmental science from the University of Texas at Austin. Should have been the best day of my life. 4 years of grinding through lab work, field research, and professors who thought sleep was optional. I had finally proven I was worth something. My parents even rented out the entire rooftop of the Four Seasons downtown to celebrate. City lights glittering below us, live jazz band, food that probably cost more than my car. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But here's the thing about my family. Nothing is ever what it looks like. See, just 2 weeks before that party, my parents had called me useless, said my degree was worthless, said I'd never bring honor to the family name. And now suddenly they're throwing me this massive celebration? Something wasn't adding up. Then, right in the middle of all that celebration and congratulations, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. When the server placed a glass in front of me, I caught my mother's hand move, quick, almost invisible. Her diamond ring caught the light as she tilted her fingers over my drink. A fine white powder dissolved into the liquid before anyone else could notice. I didn't flinch, didn't react, just picked up that glass with a smile, turned to my brother Caleb, who was sitting next to me, basking in his usual spotlight, and said the words that would change everything. "You deserve this more than me, brother." And Caleb, golden child that he is, took it without a second thought and drank every last drop. That night, under those sparkling Austin lights, I finally understood the truth. My own parents were trying to kill me, and I was about to make them regret ever thinking I was the weak one. Before I get into what happened next, you need to understand how deep this dysfunction goes. My family isn't just toxic. They're a whole hazmat situation. My father, William Porter, is the CEO of Porter Pharmaceuticals, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in Texas. The kind of guy who gets his face on business magazines and speaks at fancy conferences about innovation and corporate responsibility. Complete fraud, obviously. Behind closed doors, he's cold, calculating, and views everything through the lens of profit. To him, my brother and I weren't sons. We were investments, assets to be managed. My mother, Diana, comes from old money. Her family has been in medicine for generations. She was raised to believe that reputation and status matter more than anything else. The kind of woman who spends more on a single charity gala dress than most families spend on groceries in a year. Every public appearance is curated to perfection. Every smile is calculated. And then there's Caleb, my younger brother, 20 years old and already being groomed to take over the company, junior at Harvard studying business. Dean's List every semester, fast-tracked to a management position the second he graduated. At every party and every photo shoot, my mother introduced him as the rightful heir to the Porter legacy. Me? I was just Nate, the older son who chose the wrong path, the disappointment who studied environmental science instead of business, the one who would never amount to anything in their eyes. The favoritism started early. I still remember being in middle school, coming home with a silver medal from a cross-country competition. I was so excited. Burst through the door expecting hugs and congratulations. Instead, I found my parents throwing a mini celebration because Caleb had been selected to perform piano at some community event. Dad glanced at my medal for maybe half a second before saying something I'll never forget. "That's nice, but running won't help your career, son." Mom didn't even look up from the outfit she was picking out for Caleb. That's when I learned the rules of my family. Recognition wasn't something I could earn. It was reserved for Caleb, always. High school made it worse. Caleb was the star of everything. Debate team captain, tennis champion, straight A student. Every achievement got celebrated with parties and photos and local newspaper articles. The walls of our house were covered with his trophies and honors. Me? I got straight A's too. Won science awards. Got accepted to every college I applied to. But my achievements went into a drawer somewhere. Out of sight. Out of mind. The one time my mother actually showed up to something of mine was sophomore year when I won first place in the state science fair for my research on antibiotic contamination in local water sources. I was nervous waiting for her reaction, desperate for just one moment of approval. But when they handed me the award and snapped photos, she leaned close and whispered in my ear, "You look so sloppy, like you don't belong here." That killed whatever joy I had. Right there on stage, my parents never asked what I wanted to do with my life. They had already decided. Nate would study pharmaceuticals. Nate would join the company. Nate would work as a researcher to support his brother's leadership. Every other dream was nonsense. When I told them I loved environmental science and wanted to study the effects of industrial pollution on ecosystems, my father dismissed it with a wave of his hand. Said that was just for people who write useless reports. Said I needed to do real work to contribute to the family. When I got accepted to UT Austin for environmental studies, he threatened to cut off all financial support. It was only thanks to scholarships and student loans that I managed to hold my ground. I spent most of my life thinking I was born just to be Caleb's backdrop. He stepped onto the stage bathed in bright lights, while I stood in the shadows waiting for a glance of recognition that never came. Called stubborn. Called ungrateful. While Caleb just had to smile to receive everything. That feeling etched itself so deep that I genuinely believed I was nothing more than a shadow, an unnecessary piece in the Porter family puzzle. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the only light in those dark years. Ironically, she was my father's mother, former chemist who had been one of the most brilliant researchers in Texas back in her day. Won major research awards. Her work laid the foundation for developing new pharmaceutical compounds. In fact, her early discoveries were what allowed Porter Pharmaceuticals to launch in the first place. But here's the thing that still makes my blood boil. In every company history book and every glossy brochure, her name was nowhere to be found. They erased her completely. I remember once when I was 15, she took me down to the basement of her old house and opened a dusty wooden trunk. Inside were stacks of research notes written in her elegant handwriting. She told me those formulas had led to the very first pain relief drug that my father's company used to launch itself. They took my work, she said with this sad smile. Then they erased my name from every certificate, every photograph. Because I was a woman. Back then, people didn't believe women could stand equal to men in the lab. I asked her if she regretted it. Her eyes lit up with this fierce spark. Never. Because science isn't about glory. It's about serving people. But I do regret letting others decide my worth. Grandma Eleanor was nothing like my parents. If my father saw everything through profit and power, she looked at people, at future generations. She always told me to never let anyone say my passion was meaningless. If I loved the environment, follow it. If I wanted to fight, then fight. Don't become anyone's shadow, not even the shadow of this family. Those words became my compass. What my parents didn't know until it was too late was that Grandma had prepared a secret gift for me. When I was little, she often told me that one day I would be free, that I would have the strength to never depend on anyone. I thought it was just her way of comforting me, but she had quietly established a trust fund worth $8 million in my name alone. The conditions were clear. The money would only be released once I graduated from college or turned 25, whichever came first. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was the key to my escape. I learned about it when I was 16. Shortly before she passed away, she called me into her room, held my hand tightly, her eyes clouded by illness, but still glowing with pride. "Nate," she said, "I won't let you spend your life trapped in this cycle of injustice. Promise me, no matter what happens, you'll follow the path you choose. Don't let anyone buy you off or force you into submission." I didn't fully understand at the time, but I nodded. A few months later, she was gone, left me with this hollow ache that never really went away. My parents knew nothing about the trust until 3 months before graduation. During a company meeting about family finances and assets, the firm's longtime attorney accidentally mentioned a special account managed by an independent group of trustees. He assumed my parents already knew. I watched my father's face drain of color, watched my mother's eyes harden into a cold glare. From that moment, everything changed. The way they looked at me was completely different. It was no longer just contempt or dismissal. It was quiet hostility. They understood that if I received that inheritance, I would be completely independent. I wouldn't need the company. I wouldn't need the prestigious Porter family, and I might even have the power to stand against them. I had become a real threat, but that wasn't all. Combined with what I was about to discover about their company's illegal activities, I had become someone they needed to eliminate. I discovered the company's illegal toxic dumping during my final semester when I joined a field research project run by the Environmental Science Department. The study site was along the Colorado River, a waterway cutting through multiple industrial zones, long documented as being at risk of contamination. I chose the project not just out of scientific passion, but because I had this unshakable feeling that something was waiting to be uncovered. At first, the work was routine, collecting water and sediment samples, measuring pH levels and dissolved oxygen, checking for heavy metals. But right from the earliest tests, I noticed alarming irregularities. Mercury and lead levels were far higher than EPA safety standards. The deeper we dug, the more disturbing the results became. We started detecting traces of pharmaceutical compounds, synthetic molecules I recognized immediately from reading industry journals. These substances only show up in untreated wastewater from drug manufacturing plants. When I reported my findings to my supervising professor, he nodded thoughtfully, said they'd suspected this for a long time, but no one had ever had enough scientific data to prove it conclusively. That's when the thought hit me. Could it be that my own father's company was the culprit? I quietly devoted more time to comparing samples from different sections of the river. The current led me closer to an industrial complex, marked with a sign that made my heart stop. West Facility. Porter Pharmaceuticals. Everything I was uncovering pointed straight back at my own family. I searched through the facility's public reports on wastewater treatment. The documents were filled with numbers that looked perfect, so flawless they were unbelievable. From my internship experience, I knew no process ever ran that smoothly. Something was being hidden. I secretly took photos, stored sample data, recorded everything in a private notebook. Day by day, the evidence mounted. In samples collected just outside the plant's gates, I detected dangerously high concentrations of an experimental compound not yet included in standard testing lists. It was the same drug I had read about in the company's internal research documents. There was no way it appeared there by accident. It could only have come from Porter Pharmaceuticals. I felt my stomach twist into knots. On one hand, I was a scientist driven by truth. On the other, this was my family, my parents' company, the place where Caleb was being groomed to lead. If I went public, it would be like turning a weapon on my own bloodline. But then I remembered Grandma's words, never let anyone decide your worth. I decided to confront my parents. One evening when we sat down to dinner together, I gathered all my courage and spread the printed test results across the table. I know what the company is doing at the West facility, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I have data. I have evidence. If you don't stop the illegal dumping, I will report it. Dead silence. My father slowly lifted his gaze, his eyes sharp as blades. My mother pressed her lips tightly together. Only Caleb looked shaken, his wide eyes filled with shock. Finally, my father spoke, his voice low and cold. You don't understand what you're saying, Nate. There are things bigger than you realize. This family survives because of silence. For the first time, I didn't bow my head. Silence isn't family. Silence is complicity. From that moment, I knew I had stepped onto a path with no return. I began collecting everything. Duplicate data sets, photographs of the samples, meticulous logs of time and location. I stored them all on an encrypted drive just in case the worst happened. And combined with the inheritance my grandmother left me, I had become the one thorn in the Porter family they could never pull out. A few days before graduation, their tone changed completely. My mother started calling more often, no longer questioning my grades or pressing me about career plans. Instead, she asked what kind of flowers I wanted on the tables at my graduation dinner, what dishes I liked so the chef could prepare them. My father even sent me a text. Congratulations in advance. You've done something good. Reading those words sent a chill down my spine. My father had never once praised me in my life. This change didn't bring comfort. It only made me more suspicious. They said they would throw a grand party on the rooftop of the Four Seasons. Every glass wall would open to a sweeping view of the city. You deserve a celebration worthy of you, my mother said sweetly, her tone so sugary it felt fake. I forced a polite smile and replied, yes, thank you, Mom. But deep down, I knew nothing my parents did ever came without strings attached. In those final days, I buried myself in finishing my research files while also carefully preparing a plan to protect myself. I kept one copy of the environmental data at the university, another on my personal drive, and a third with my supervising professor, just in case I happened to disappear. One evening, I accidentally overheard a heated argument behind the door of my father's study. My mother's voice was full of worry. William, are you sure this is necessary? What if someone finds out? My father's tone was low and sharp. Don't you get it? He already has enough evidence. Add the inheritance on top of that, and he'll never depend on us again. He could bring the whole company down. My mother's voice trembled. But he's our son. My father cut her off. He's a threat. The FDA has already begun a quiet investigation. If Nate speaks, we lose everything. I held my breath, my heart pounding violently. Then my father's voice dropped lower, but still clear enough for me to hear. The plan is just to make him sick for a few days. Get him hospitalized. During that time, we'll take care of the paperwork. Cover the records. If the worst happens, if he dies before the trust is released, the money reverts back to us. That's the law. I stood frozen behind the door, cold sweat breaking across my skin. My own parents were plotting to poison me. And it wasn't just about the $8 million. It was about silencing the truth about the West facility. In that instant, I wanted to storm in and scream. But another voice inside whispered, if they know you've heard, they'll find another way. Something worse. I stepped back, forced myself to return to the living room and pretend I hadn't heard a thing. That evening, Caleb sat beside me, chatting cheerfully about his summer internship at the company. Asked if after graduation, I planned to apply to an international environmental organization. I looked at his face, radiant and confident, completely unaware of our parents' scheme. It struck me then. Caleb hadn't been part of that conversation. He was completely separate from their plotting. To him, I was still just the distant older brother, never the enemy. Watching him laugh, my chest tightened. Part of me resented him for being adored, for receiving unconditional love. But another part wanted to protect him, to make sure he never became collateral in our parents' power games. I knew that in just a few days, everything would explode, and I had to be ready. The night of my graduation party finally arrived. As I stepped out of the glass elevator onto the rooftop, I was nearly overwhelmed by the extravagance. Golden ribbons of light wrapped around each column. Banquet tables draped in pristine white linen, adorned with imported flowers. A jazz ensemble playing soft melodies that mixed with the delicate clinking of glasses. To outsiders, this was proof of love. A dazzling display from a powerful family honoring their son. To me, every flickering candle felt like a flame waiting to consume me. Most of the guests were familiar faces from the Texas business world. My father's partners, sharply dressed executives, high-powered attorneys who had served our family for years. Even a few reporters from local business magazines. Among the sea of strangers, only a handful of people truly belonged to me. My buddies, Jake and Mia, looking slightly out of place, hurried over and wrapped me in congratulations. I forced a smile, silently grateful that I wasn't completely alone. As I spoke with my friends, I could feel my parents' eyes fixed on me, never wavering for even a second. Their presence pressed on me like two hawks circling prey, watching every movement, every word that left my lips. Their smiles stayed in place, but the stiffness of their lips and the calculating glint in their eyes told a different story. I caught a glimpse of my father leaning in to whisper something to Gerald, the company's longtime attorney. Gerald nodded, then glanced at me with the sharp, appraising look of someone assessing an item about to go up for auction. A shiver ran through me. If he was here tonight, it wasn't just to celebrate my graduation. Caleb appeared at my side, smiling radiantly as always, lifted his glass and tapped me lightly on the shoulder. Since everyone keeps asking me about your plans after graduation, he laughed. Why are they so obsessed with that? Mom and Dad keep bringing it up over and over. I looked at my brother and saw the innocence in his eyes, mixed with a faint trace of unease. He still didn't understand the truth behind it all. I forced a smile. They probably just want to make sure I'll do the right thing for the family. Caleb frowned. But isn't this your moment? Why aren't they asking if you're happy? That simple question pierced me like a blade. I turned away, sipping my water to avoid answering. When I looked back, I caught my mother's stare fixed on me, her smile stiff as wax. She stood among a cluster of society women, her glass shimmering in hand. Yet her attention never wavered from my every move. I drew in a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Every sense was on high alert. I knew I was standing in the predator's arena, and I was the prey. The laughter and chatter faded into a distant hum, leaving only the pounding of my heartbeat in my chest. My mind flashed to the notebook filled with water sample data I had hidden away. As long as I was alive, that truth could still come to light. And maybe that was exactly why my parents had decided I had to be eliminated tonight. But I did not tremble. I had already overheard their scheme. I was ready. And I swore to myself I would not let them win. The party entered its most formal stage. Warm golden lights spread across the rooftop. The soft sound of live jazz drifted from the band. Guests waited for the moment to raise their glasses in honor of the family's celebrated graduate. I sat there in the suit Jake had helped me pick out, my heart uneasy from the moment the evening began. My parents hadn't taken their eyes off me. Every movement I made felt like it was under a microscope. My father suddenly picked up a bottle of sparkling cider. The servers poured for the guests, but when they reached our table, my father insisted on doing it himself. A nice personal touch, he announced with a smooth smile. For my graduate son. He filled my glass and set it in front of me. I watched my mother lean forward, pretending to adjust the napkin near my plate. But I caught it, the quick movement of her hand over my glass, the faint shimmer of powder dissolving into the golden liquid. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The words I had overheard came rushing back, just enough to make him sick. Hospitalized for a few days, time to shift the assets. My throat went dry, but I kept my smile, calm, unshaken. I glanced around. My mother pretended to chat with the women beside her, though her eyes never left me. My father raised his glass, waiting for me to follow. In that tense instant, I leaned slightly and tapped Jake's hand beneath the table. He looked up and met my eyes filled with both a plea and resolve. My lips barely moved as I whispered, "Record this. Record everything." Jake gave the faintest nod. Quietly, he slid his phone from his pocket, placed it on his lap, and with one discreet touch, set the camera rolling toward the table. "To Nate!" my father declared, his voice booming across the rooftop. Guests echoed the cheer, their clapping filling the air. I lifted my glass. Caleb, sitting beside me, smiled brightly, his face glowing with pride. Not a trace of suspicion. He had never glimpsed the dark side of our parents. Never imagined they could harm their own child. My father's eyes flashed, urging me to drink. I drew in a steady breath, then turned suddenly to Caleb, my voice soft and warm. "My dear brother, today isn't just my day. You've always been there encouraging me whenever I was struggling. I want to share this moment with you." I smiled and handed him my glass. The guests clapped approvingly, believing it was nothing more than a sweet gesture of brotherly affection. "Oh, Nate, you're amazing!" Caleb exclaimed, his voice brimming with emotion. He took the glass without a shred of doubt. I quickly lifted his glass, the clear, safe one, and brought it to my lips. In that instant, my parents went pale. The color drained completely from their faces. My mother stammered, half reaching out to stop it, but it was too late. In front of dozens of guests and the phones already recording, they couldn't do a thing. Caleb tilted his head back and drank in one long sip. "Delicious," he said with a carefree laugh, utterly unaware of what he had just swallowed. The music swelled again. The guests returned to their conversations. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw my parents standing frozen. They forced smiles, clapped along with the crowd, but their hands trembled. The family attorney bent low to whisper something, his own face betraying panic. I set my glass down gently on the table and smiled calmly. Beneath the table, I gripped Jake's hand tightly. The camera was still rolling, capturing the entire exchange, the glass switch, the flicker of terror in my parents' eyes. I lowered my head and whispered just loud enough for Jake to hear. "The evidence is sealed now. They'll have to play by my rules." The rooftop buzzed with life. Jazz floated through the night air. Glasses clinked, and laughter filled the space. I kept my face serene, though inside my heart pounded so hard I thought it might shatter my ribs. I had just done something so daring I could hardly believe it myself. I had passed the glass my father poured to Caleb, and now all I could do was wait and see what would unfold. The first 10 minutes passed without incident. Caleb laughed brightly, shaking hands with guests, even boasting that our family was preparing to entrust him with bigger responsibilities at the company. I stood off to the side quietly watching. Every time my parents' eyes flicked toward Caleb, I could see the tension behind their forced smiles, the tight press of their lips. They were afraid. I knew it. And then about 10 minutes later, the change began. Caleb, who was always flawlessly composed, suddenly placed a hand over his chest, his face drained of color. "Are you okay?" a friend asked as he swayed unsteadily. "I'm just a little dizzy," Caleb murmured, forcing a fragile smile. But within a minute, cold sweat poured down his skin. His makeup-free face turned ghostly pale. I held my breath, my heart clenched with a pang. No matter how bitter I felt toward him, seeing Caleb suffering like this still struck me with a stab of sorrow. But then the memories came rushing back. The times he had taken credit for things, the times my parents defended him and cast me aside. And tonight, the fact that our parents had meant this poison for me. "My heart is racing too fast," Caleb gasped, before collapsing suddenly onto the floor. Screams erupted across the party. Guests stumbled back in panic. Others shouted frantically for help. "Call 911!" someone yelled. "Get an ambulance now!" I rushed forward, kneeling beside Caleb. Strangely, I was calmer than anyone else. Amid the chaos, I leaned close to Jake and whispered, "Send the video now. Back it up to the cloud. Don't let it get lost." Jake nodded rapidly, his hands trembling but firm as he tapped on his phone, securing the evidence. The wail of ambulance sirens cut through the Austin night faster than I expected. Paramedics rushed onto the rooftop with a stretcher and emergency equipment. Caleb was laid down, his face ghostly pale, his eyes fluttering half shut. "He's struggling to breathe. Heart arrhythmia," one medic shouted. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately." I stepped forward, keeping close, my gaze steady, my voice clear and firm. "Wait, I have critical information. Tell the doctors this is very likely a toxin related to an experimental compound from Porter Pharmaceuticals, project code R17. The substance is called cyclopentylamine derivative 47. The paramedics froze for a split second. One turned to me, startled by the certainty in my voice. "Are you sure?" I nodded sharply. "I interned in the company's lab. I know the signs." Without hesitation, the medic scribbled notes and relayed the message through his radio. I glanced at my parents. They stood frozen, their faces ashen. My mother stammered, her voice cracking. "Nate, what are you saying? Don't slander your own parents like this." I turned, my voice sharp as steel. "Slander! Everyone here saw it. Father is the one who chose that bottle. And soon the doctors will confirm everything. If there's truly nothing to hide, then what are you so afraid of?" The air went silent. A few guests began glancing at my parents with suspicion. The family attorney stood stiff beside them, sweat beading on his forehead. The ambulance sped away. Jake caught my arm, worry etched on his face. "Are you sure you want to go?" "I can go with you. The police will be here any minute." "That's exactly why I have to go," I replied, my eyes unwavering. "If I'm not there, they'll twist the story, make me out to be the liar. I have to be the one to speak the truth first." At the emergency room, chaos reigned. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Caleb, inserting IV lines, attaching heart monitors. The screen showed erratic spikes, his heartbeat in complete disarray. One doctor frowned at the test results. Signs of chemical poisoning, likely an industrial compound. I stepped in immediately. It could be R17, an experimental compound suspended because it caused arrhythmia and respiratory failure. Porter Pharmaceuticals studied it 2 years ago. The doctors snapped up, startled. And how do you know this? I've been secretly investigating their lab for months. That's why the moment Caleb started sweating cold and his heartbeat went erratic, I recognized the symptoms instantly. This isn't random. It's the classic reaction to the compound. The doctor nodded sharply and gave the order to prepare the experimental antidote protocol. Just then, police arrived. 2 officers stepped in and immediately requested statements. There is suspicion the victim was poisoned. We need information. My father pushed forward, his voice harsh. This is a private family matter. My son only had a drop in blood pressure. There's no need for police interference. But the officer cut him off firmly. The doctors have confirmed signs of chemical poisoning. This is now a criminal matter. You and your wife will need to cooperate. Every eye in the emergency room shifted toward my parents. They tried to hold steady, but the tremor in their hands betrayed them completely. I leaned toward Jake and whispered, "It's begun. They won't escape this time." Caleb remained unconscious, but with the emergency antidote, his vitals slowly stabilized. The doctor turned to me, his voice unwavering. "Your information saved his life. Without it, we would have lost critical minutes." I nodded silently. Inside, I felt both relief and bitterness. Caleb had been saved, but the truth about my parents was now out in the open. This was only the beginning. But at least tonight, the balance had shifted. The one who was meant to be the victim was now the one holding the truth and the evidence. While Caleb lay motionless in intensive care, I sat waiting in the stark white hospital corridor. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from the police, calls from lawyers, even reporters. News of Caleb's collapse and suspected poisoning at the Porter family's lavish graduation party had already spread through Austin like wildfire. Within just 24 hours, the FBI was officially involved. I knew the reason wasn't only the poisoning. It was the trail leading straight to the experimental compounds inside Porter Pharmaceuticals' labs. When the FBI and Austin police stormed Porter Pharmaceuticals' headquarters with an emergency search warrant, I wasn't surprised. Box after box of files, hard drives, and records were sealed and hauled away. It took only a few days for toxicology experts to confirm it. The compound found in Caleb's blood matched an experimental drug the FDA had already suspended due to suspected toxicity. What chilled me to the bone was that in every report the company had submitted to regulators, there wasn't a single mention of such dangerous side effects. Then came an anonymous email to the FBI from a scientist who had worked on the project. He wrote that they were forced to alter the data, made to hide the adverse reactions. He still had the original reports. The FBI traced the lead and uncovered a hidden archive on the company's internal servers. Troves of documents showing that top executives, including my own parents, had ordered staff to falsify numbers, erase lab animal deaths, and bury liver toxicity warnings. My hands shook as I flipped through the copied files. All the suspicions I had carried for so long were no longer theories. They were fact, but that wasn't all. The company's environmental division was exposed too. In a warehouse outside the city, investigators uncovered crates of untreated toxic chemicals buried directly in the ground. The shipping records were forged to deceive the EPA. I thought back to the polluted rivers where I had taken samples, and fury burned hot in my chest. The video Jake recorded at the party was also submitted to police. On it, the camera caught the moment my mother discreetly slipped something into the glass before my father handed it to me. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but the movement was unmistakable. Forensic testing confirmed that the glass contained traces of the same toxic experimental compound. Sitting in the interrogation room, my voice stayed calm but unyielding. My parents have always seen me as a thorn in their side. I refused to join the company. I refused to enable their corrupt deals. And that night, they didn't just try to ruin my reputation. They tried to end my life. The next day, the Austin American-Statesman ran a bold front-page headline. Pharmaceutical CEO and wife charged with conspiracy to murder son, fraud, and environmental crimes. Photos of Porter Pharmaceuticals' headquarters sealed with FBI tape flooded every news channel. CNN, the New York Times, every major outlet reported it. What began as a family tragedy had erupted into a national shockwave about corporate ethics and the moral decay of America's elite. Social media exploded. Thousands of comments called it the cruelest case of parental betrayal in a decade. A new hashtag spread like wildfire: justice for Nate and Caleb. I read the posts one by one, my hands trembling, my eyes wet. 9 months later, at the federal courthouse in Austin, the trial officially began. My parents, dressed in dark suits, sat at the defendant's table. their faces cold, as if they still believed they held control. Their defense attorney raised his voice. My clients are being framed. This was nothing more than an accident. Nate fabricated this story to destroy his parents and seize their fortune. I sat there listening, my whole body cold and rigid. But the prosecution was ready. They presented the video, the toxicology results, the falsified documents and testimony from the company's own employees. A map of environmental contamination lit up the screen, sending murmurs rippling through the courtroom. Caleb, still frail and not fully recovered, stepped up to the witness stand. I gripped my hands tightly, watching his trembling figure. I never imagined my own parents would do this, Caleb said, his voice breaking. I trusted them. But now I know the truth. They poisoned me, and they meant it for Nate. My mother tried to speak from the defendant's table. It was all a misunderstanding. My son is mistaken. We would never harm our own child. But at that very moment, the prosecutor revealed the final blow. An email my father had sent to the research division. Eliminate all adverse reaction data. If not, this project is dead. In the end, after weeks of testimony and argument, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, document forgery, gross violations of environmental law. The judge struck his gavel, his voice firm and resonant. The defendants are sentenced to long-term federal prison. All personal and corporate assets are hereby frozen. Porter Pharmaceuticals is placed under court supervision, pending dissolution. The courtroom erupted with the sound of cameras clicking, keyboards clattering, and hushed voices buzzing. I closed my eyes as a single tear slipped down my cheek, not out of pity, but because at last, the truth had come to light. When the trial ended, the fallout was immediate and brutal. My father got 15 years federal. My mother got 12. No possibility of parole for either of them until they served at least 85% of their sentences. The judge made sure of that. Porter Pharmaceuticals was officially seized by the government. Assets frozen. Operations shut down. Over 2,000 employees lost their jobs, which I genuinely felt bad about. But the company had been poisoning communities for years. Sometimes the rot goes too deep to save. The financial damage was staggering. Between legal fees, fines, and civil settlements to the families affected by the environmental contamination, my parents' entire fortune was wiped out. The mansion I grew up in got seized and auctioned off, sold for $2.3 million to some tech executive from California. I drove by once just to see it. Didn't feel a thing. My grandmother's trust fund was released to me the week after the verdict. $8 million. I moved into the lakeside house she'd left me. Nothing fancy, just a wooden cabin with a porch facing Lake Travis. First night there, I sat outside with a cup of coffee and watched the sunset. Didn't check my phone once. First time in months, I actually felt like I could breathe. Caleb moved in with me after he got out of the hospital. The poisoning had done a number on his heart. Doctors said he'd need monitoring for at least a year, but he was alive, and something in him had changed. First week at the house, he came to me looking like he hadn't slept in days. I'm not finishing my business degree, he said. I'm applying to law school. Environmental law. I want to help people like the ones our company hurt. I didn't say anything, just nodded. That was enough. 3 months later, I used part of my inheritance to set up a foundation, named it after Grandma Eleanor. The fund provides medical assistance to families affected by the contamination, plus scholarships for students studying environmental science and public health. We've helped over 200 families so far. The extended family drama was predictable. Aunts and uncles who'd ignored me for years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Cousins I hadn't heard from since childhood started sending Facebook messages, all of them with the same energy. Concern for my parents, questions about the inheritance, hints about how families should stick together. I blocked every single one of them. 6 months after the sentencing, I got a letter from the federal prison where my mother was being held. Handwritten, 3 pages long, full of apologies and explanations and requests for forgiveness. She said she never meant to hurt me. Said my father pressured her into it. Said she prayed for me every day. I read it once. Then I burned it in the fireplace. A week later, another letter arrived. This one from my father. Different tone entirely. No apologies, just accusations. Said I had destroyed the family legacy. Said I was ungrateful for everything they'd given me. Said I would regret this for the rest of my life. I didn't bother reading past the first paragraph. Straight into the fire. The letters kept coming for about 2 months. Then they stopped. I assume they finally got the message. Last month, Caleb got his law school acceptance letter. Full scholarship to UT Austin. He's starting in the fall. Kid's actually excited about studying for once in his life. Wild how almost dying can change your priorities. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. In this video, there will be 4 stories. The first one, Virginity does not guarantee loyalty. The next one, never ever fight over a cheating partner. The next one, cheating is relationship treason. And finally, karma eventually bites back twice as hard. Now let's get into today's story, and you can see the title coming up on your screen. My husband impregnated my AP wife, and AP stands for affair partner. This story dates back to May of 2016. She starts off by saying, I was referred here by my sister who saw it getting opinions of people not familiar with my situation could benefit me. I'm a 31 female for this posting. Call me Gina and my husband Greg, 3 male. We've been married for 10 years and together nearly 13. We have 2 children, a girl, 9 and a boy, 8. Greg is the only man I had been with prior to my affair, while Greg had 3 previous girlfriends prior to dating me. We had a great marriage full of love, laughter, and family. Though we had been married for a number of years, our intimacy was completely fulfilling for me, and I believe it was for Greg too. Now, for the part where I ruined everything. I met a man, call him Rich, in my daughter's soccer practice. He was a parent of a 6-year-old girl who was playing in the league below my daughter. He worked from home and was able to attend soccer practice and games. Initially, I spoke to him as part of a group of parents as we stood on the sidelines watching our children. The only reason he stood out is he was one of the few dads that were there during practices which normally took place just after school. Eventually, we started talking more frequently, and then I noticed he would always come right over and stand near me at every practice, even when I was with other mothers. These chats led to an uncomfortable conversation where he told me he had strong feelings for me. I clearly told him I was happily married and we'd have discontinued speaking with this. He backed off while I rebuffed his advances. For some reason, I like the attention. There's that attention and validation that pretty much all women are always looking for, and she's falling for it here. As you can see with this guy, I know it was so wrong now, but I want to be honest here and tell you what I was feeling. Eventually, he brought his feelings up again and asked if I'd meet him for coffee at a shop in the next town over. At first I told him no, but then decided to meet with him, making it clear it would only be this one meeting for coffee and nothing more. I know now, just talking to him was cheating and totally disrespecting my husband and family, but I couldn't stop it. At the end of our private meeting before we left to go to our children's practice, he told me he wanted me to come to his house tomorrow. At the same time, he gave me a piece of paper with his home address. I said, no, I can't. But with that, he gently kissed me, and I'm ashamed to say, not only did I kiss him back, I kissed him again when he pulled away. Oh my goodness, these are 2 nasty, grimy people. The next day, we met at his house, and Hat is just like that. She meets at his house, and they do the deed. There was no talking before or build-up, we just did it. As I looked around and saw photos of his beautiful wife and child, I became so upset with myself. I started thinking about Greg and my kids and burst out crying, telling Rich I couldn't do this again. We cleaned up, got dressed, and left in our cars for practice. For the next week, I avoided Rich at soccer practice, and when I did eventually speak to him again, I told him I didn't want to see or speak to him ever again. With this, he handed me a note with the name and address of a hotel in the same neighboring town. He said he wanted me to meet him there tomorrow at our special time, but would understand if I didn't come. I just told him, no, I can't. And then I left. That night, I stayed up all night thinking about this situation and how it would destroy my marriage and family if this ever became known. But foolishly, I thought it was unlikely, as we never called or texted, and all of our communications were verbal or via these handwritten notes. You see how sneaky and underhanded people can be when they're cheating if they keep it on the down low like this. A person may never find out unless they slip up, which you're going to see these people do. My intention was not to go, but I broke down and did again. As with our first meeting, it ended with me crying and telling Rich, we cannot do this again. This time he agreed with me, but said our lovemaking was worth the risk. We parted and this time remained apart for a full month with no contact, outside of brief conversations at soccer practice and at games while talking with other parents. What's most disturbing is that at one of the games, now listen to this. This is disturbing. My husband, Greg, and Rich ended up talking for over 20 minutes. This made me feel terrible, but in a way, it excited me in some twisted reason. Man, you are a sicko. If that excited you, you are a sick person. Fast forward to my D-Day, the day my husband discovered my affair, and the absolute worst day of my life. She says, already crying. Rich and I spoke at soccer practice the day before and agreed. We can no longer meet as we were both happily married and loved our spouses and children. If you're cheating on your husband and he's cheating on his wife, you are not happily married. And guess what? You do not love or respect your spouses. That is just bunk. However, and here's where I made a really bad mistake. We agreed to meet one final time. I know people on here are not going to believe me, but it's true. D-Day was to be our final time. I don't believe you. I can tell you that right now. That was not going to be your final time. The only reason why it was your final time is because, as you're going to see here, she gets busted. I didn't want to meet at Rich's house as I couldn't take seeing the photos of his wife and child, so I offered to have him meet me at my home. The plan was for him to park on the adjacent street and walk over to my house, then walk up to the side door where I would let him in. It was slightly raining, and no one was out on the street, so I thought he did so undetected. You see again how much planning goes into these affairs when people lie and they say, oh, it just happened on the spur of the moment. We just did it, because we kind of ran into each other. No, all of these affairs, you'll find out if you really dig deeper, are really well planned out trysts. And no one can get away by saying, oh, it just happened. No, it didn't happen. It was a calculated decision. I took into our home office on the second floor, which has a gas bed, and that is where we got together. I want to say I would have never done anything in our marital bed like we did at Rich's house, as I have too much love and respect for my husband. Really, lady, you have the nerve to say that and write that. Unbelievable, since this was going to be our last time. There was a lot of kissing and foreplay before the actual act, just as we began. My husband Greg came into the room and stood beside the bed recording. I don't know how long he had been there before. He said, what the HD double is going on here with this. Rich and I quickly separated and I just started crying, telling Greg I'm sorry, and it could explain everything. Explain what she says. I don't know. But at the time, it was all I could think to say. And a lot of these stories you'll hear, that's one of the first things that people say if they are busted cheating. Oh, I can explain everything, even though they're naked with another person. And that is just a defense mechanism to buy time. They don't have anything to explain. What are they going to explain? This is crazy. I don't know what got into Rich, but he completely panicked and tried to push past Greg, who was blocking the door. Greg is over 6 feet tall and weighs nearly 230, while Rich is only about 510 and weighs about 160. So he bounced off Greg, falling back to the floor. He got up again and attempted to charge at Greg, but this time Greg stepped forward and pushed him back hard. Now listen to what happens next. The push sent Rich flying back where he hit one of the window screens and fell backwards out the window, landing on a large juniper-type bush we have in front of the house. He was completely naked. I cried and begged Greg to stop as he was going to hurt Rich, and I didn't want him, Greg, to get in trouble with this. Greg just gave me a mean look and ran down the stairs. I was afraid he was going to beat Rich and was so fearful my husband would get in trouble with the law. I watched from the window, wrapped in a comforter, and saw Rich still laying naked in the bush, trying to extract himself. I could see he was scratched up and bleeding, but didn't appear seriously injured. Now we're at a point in this story where I want to encourage you, if you're liking what you hear, hit that like button that will get this video seen by people all over the world. Now, let's go on with our story. Greg emerged from the house holding Rich's cell phone and started shouting at Rich to give him his passcode. Rich started begging for mercy, pleading with Greg not to hurt him and not to call his wife Kate. Greg got angry and told Rich to give me the effing code, or you're going to suffer with this. Rich quickly gave him the code and Greg entered it into the phone. Greg then called Kate and told her who he was and explained that he was standing here with her naked husband, who he just caught having S with his wife. After some additional back and forth and comforting talk, he gave Kate our address and ended the call. I then saw our next-door neighbor walking over. He asked Greg if everything was all right. Greg told him no, but said he'd be okay. Greg then thanked him for calling him and explained he caught us in the act. Our neighbor said he knew something was up when he saw a man sneaking around outside the house. He said at first he thought he was robbing the place until he saw me answer the door and let him in. The neighbor told Greg he just had to call me. Well, Greg, you need to buy that guy a beer. Or better yet, buy him dinner. Or better yet, buy him a huge gift certificate because he said he saved you a lot of grief and future aggravation. Greg told the neighbor he was going to call the police as he wanted to report the situation. Hearing this, Rich began crying and pleaded with Greg not to do so. At this point, he was still naked and had began shaking violently. I shouted down to Greg, asking him to please not call the police, but he ignored us and called. The police came within a few minutes. Greg and our neighbor met the officer out at the curb where they spoke for several minutes, pointing to the neighbor's house and then up to the office window. They next walked up to the bush where Rich was hunched over, crying and naked. This Rich is just an emotional basket case. The officer asked Greg if he could retrieve his clothes, and Greg said he would do so. When I heard Greg open the door, I ran to the top of the steps, crying and telling him how sorry I was and how much I loved him. But he never looked up. He just gathered Rich's clothes and shoes off the floor and stairs and went back outside. The officer took the clothes from Greg and handed them to Rich, and he clumsily got dressed. Rich was hyperventilating and still violently shaking at this point. I had never seen anyone do this and realized it was probably from a combination of nervous fear, shock, and from being cold, as it was only about 55 degrees. I stood at the window while the officer questioned Rich, but they couldn't see me because of the screens we have on our windows. He told Rich to settle down and relax, which he eventually did. Rich said it was all his fault and he deserved it. He explained truthfully what happened and said he charged it Greg, as he just wanted to get out of there. The officer asked him if Greg acted defensively or offensively when he pushed him. Rich replied that it was. Defensively, I was relieved Rich didn't falsely accuse Greg. Soon, a number of neighbors gathered out front. The neighbor who reported me to Greg was explaining to them what was going on. I was so embarrassed and just cried harder. Now back to the police officer and Rich. The officer asked him if he wanted to press charges. Rich said he didn't, and said he just wanted to leave and promised to never bother our family again. After this, Rich's wife, Kate, pulled up out front. My husband walked out to greet her where they spoke for a minute or so. Rich ran over to her crying and saying he was sorry, but she didn't acknowledge him. The officer spoke to her, and I could faintly hear her say she wanted Rich to stay away from her. The officer then told Rich to step back, and he did and started ugly crying. The officer spoke to Greg and Kate for a few minutes, then walked into the house to speak to me. He called up the stairs and asked if I could come down and talk with him. I said okay, but asked him to give me a minute or so to get dressed. The officer then took my statement at the end of our conversation. He said that my husband requested I voluntarily leave the home. I told the officer I didn't want to, and then I needed to speak with my husband. He said he understood, but explained it would be best if I left, at least for tonight, so things could calm down. I cried and he asked if there was anyone I could call, and I told him yes, my parents. No sooner did I say this, I heard my mom on the porch talking to Greg. When I saw her face, I just said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I really messed up bad." The officer explained to Mom that it would be best for me to stay with her for a few days until things settled down. I then went upstairs with Mom to pack. She didn't say anything while I packed, but I knew she was angry, embarrassed, and really disappointed with me. When Mom and I came downstairs and walked outside, only the officer was there, along with several neighbors who were still out on the sidewalk talking. The officer explained that Greg had gone to pick up the kids at school and would be taking them to practice, then out to eat. He said Greg asked that I close and lock the door, and Greg, would call me in a few days to talk. When I got back to my parents' house, both Mom and Dad scolded me for destroying my marriage. I just said I was sorry and explained that I was going to win back Greg's trust. My dad told me that was never going to happen, and that I should just start preparing for divorce. With this, I burst out crying, and Mom asked him why he'd say something like that. He just said, "Because it's true. And that's because your dad obviously is a strong man, and he knows Greg is a strong man, and he knows that a strong man is not going to put up with a cheater for the next 2 days." I texted and called Greg, but he didn't respond. Then, on Wednesday evening, he sent a text stating we can meet on Saturday morning in our house to discuss next steps. He also wrote in the text that he had already explained to our kids what happened, so they were fully aware. I couldn't believe he did this without me. I thought, they must hate me now. In a separate text, Greg said he filed charges against Rich and secured a 30-day TRO, a temporary restraining order. I hated hearing this, as I just wanted this nightmare to end. To make matters worse, the incident was written up in the police section of our local paper. While the paper didn't give names or our house number, it did give our street name and was written. So it was obvious what happened, so now I'm sure she's the talk of the town. Saturday came, and I was both excited and nervous to see Greg again. My dad and Mom drove me and stayed out on the porch as Greg is. Greg and I met inside. I told them they could leave, but Greg said he wanted them there as he didn't trust being alone with me. She says sigh in parentheses. I went in to hug him and he just held up his hands, keeping me away. We sat down and he handed me separation papers. I broke down crying and told him, "No, please don't do this." I pleaded and again told him how sorry I was. And I loved him, and only him. He just said, "No, you don't," and started explaining the papers. I continued begging, but he just kept explaining how the separation will work. He said I can move back in, but would be staying in the office. That was still just the way I left it. He then said he was splitting our bank accounts $5,050, and we would split the equity in the house if it ever sold, but explained he wanted me to surrender any claim to his 401k. He then went on and explained, "Now listen to this, that starting next month I would be required to contribute 35%, or about $20,300 per month of our living expenses, including the mortgage insurances, utilities, car payments, food, etc. Since I didn't have a job, I would need to pay him for my half of the savings." He explained that all of this was clearly detailed in the separation agreement and that I needed to get a lawyer to review it. I told him, I don't want to get a lawyer. I just wanted to talk to him about us. He calmly but firmly said, there's nothing to talk about, and said he just wants to officially separate from me. He next explained that the only time he will talk to me would be for matters pertaining to our kids or when our kids are talking to both of us. He said anything else I say will be ignored. I cried and asked if he was going to divorce me, and he said, right now that's my plan. I told him I couldn't live without him, and I will fight with everything I had to keep him. He just looked at me with disgust and started laughing loudly. With that, he yelled out to my parents to come in. He then called his parents on speakerphone and explained everything. He just told me to both sets of parents. It was like a business meeting. While for me, it was torture. I just apologized to Greg and our parents and said I was going to fight to save my husband and family. This all went down this morning, and now I'm here in the office writing this post. At 1:44 a.m., as I can't sleep talking to my sister earlier, she gave me great advice and said I might also want to post here to see if any readers might offer some additional suggestions that could be helpful. So here I am. What should I do? Have I broken my marriage beyond repair? Let me just interject here and tell you, yes, you have. Is there any chance of getting the beautiful life I destroyed back, or is it gone forever? Let me tell you, it is gone forever, she says. All responses, even the bad ones, are welcome. Right now, I just feel like an outcast with no one to turn to. My sister has been great, though she too is disgusted with me. Thank you in advance for reading this and for any replies you send, Gina. So that's the end of her original post. Now I'm going to read a few responses that she got from the community, and all of these responses are from women. I usually pick a combination of responses from women and men, but this time on this posting, all the responses for men were more very short and to the point, like, oh, you're nasty, oh, you're terrible, or I'd divorce you immediately. Things like that, where some of the women had more descriptive and I think a little better comments. And let's get to them right now. The first one says, not only have you destroyed your marriage, you have forever changed the relationship you have with your children, your parents, and everyone in the community. Something similar, though not as dramatic, happened to my sister 6 years ago. Her husband divorced her, and everyone in our small town still refers to her as the home wrecker. Good luck. Here's the second response from a woman who says, do you know how much danger you put your husband in by bringing this strange man into his home? In the heat of the moment, your lover could have seriously hurt Greg by knocking him down. Or your lover could have been seriously hurt or worse when he fell out of the window. Your husband could be facing prison time now, all because of you. You are beyond awful. And then, finally, the third response here. She says, I was in your shoes 7 years ago. I know you're not going to want to hear this, but the best thing to do is to divorce. My loving husband took me back. But our marriage was never the same. He never touched me again, and instead began a relationship with his now wife. He met her through the one-sided open marriage I offered him. We finally divorced 2 years ago. I wish you well. Well, 2 things to say about this response. Number 1, never stay with a cheater. Number 2, open relationships do not work. Now here's the updates. And guess what? There's only one update, and it's a final update that she gave about 15 months later. You can see this update is from August of 2017. So about 15 months later, she says, a lot has happened in my life since I last updated. I first want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Reading all the responses helped me keep going, even though many were very critical of my actions. I can say from experience that not every story has a happy ending. In fact, some endings are just terrible. Greg and I are now divorced. Good job, Greg. That's what you should have done because you never want to stay with a cheater. I tear up now just hearing those words, and I still can't believe it. It's just a nightmare. If you remember from my original post, my husband and I were back living together in our home, even though we were legally separated. Things were cold between us for the first month. But then he started to come around talking to me more, and even laughing and joking with me and the kids. I was feeling good about our progress and was confident we could reconcile if we kept on the path we were on. Then out of the blue, 4 months into our separation, Greg said he wanted to talk with me alone, without the kids. I thought this was going to be a discussion about us taking the next steps towards reconciliation. But instead, he told me he wanted a divorce. I was completely devastated. I know all wayward wives use that term a lot in these posts, but I can tell you I truly was. Greg explained that while he will always care deeply for me as the mother of his 2 beautiful children, the love, passion, and trust he had for me is gone. I tried everything to get him to change his mind, but it was already made up. I broke down and we hugged, but I could tell it was not a hug of a husband and a wife. It was more like two friends, since we had been separated nearly 4 months and had already agreed to the division of assets and custody in the separation agreement. The divorce went quickly and was finalized in February of this year. Greg treated me fairly. He bought out my equity share in our home and even gave me an additional $10,000 as he wanted to make sure I was able to maintain a good home for our kids, even though I had a nice sum of money from the divorce. It was not enough to buy a home, nor was it enough to live on for the rest of my life. So I ended up taking a job at a new donut franchise just down the street from our kids' school. I know the woman who owns the franchise, so I contacted her about working there and she hired me on the spot. Contrary to what you might think, I love working there. The owner is very nice and understanding. My coworkers are awesome and our customers are super friendly. I kind of wished I had gotten a job while I was married, as maybe things wouldn't have turned out like they have. How does the saying go? And I don't mind is the devil's playground or something like that. Oh well, I can't change the past, she says. As for Greg, a month after our divorce was final. Now this is where I think Greg made a mistake. He announced to his family and friends that he and Kate were officially a couple and were expecting a child in August. I ended up finding out through my kids, who are excited about having two new siblings, the new baby and Kate's daughter. This news absolutely destroyed me. I just couldn't believe Greg would do this, and then not tell me about it himself. It's obvious Greg and Kate were seeing each other while we were separated. In fact, the gossip is that they started their relationship right after D-Day. We live in a no-fault state, so it doesn't matter anyway. Unlike Greg and I, Kate decided to divorce Rich right away since the house they were living in was gifted to her, and they apparently had little savings. Their divorce was final months before ours. As for Rich, it's a sad story. He was very broken up by the divorce, and on Halloween of last year, he was picked up for a DUI, driving under the influence. That's a bad charge. Apparently, this was the second such violation. Kate used this to get full custody of their daughter, and now he only has supervised visitation, which occurs at Kate's parents' house as Greg and Kate don't want to see him, and Rich is deathly afraid of Greg. I learned this through gossip. I think it's dirty and cruel for Kate to do this to her child's father, even though she may hate him. But I understand why she did what she did. So on one hand, she's saying, I think it's dirty and cruel for her to do this. But then she says, I understand why she did what she did. I understand why she did what she did. Her husband's a cheater. Her husband's a liar. Her husband has 2 DUIs. Do you really want to trust your daughter with this guy? He's totally unstable. Kate and her daughter are now living with Greg and my kids in my house. Of course, it's no longer my house, but I still think of it that way. This whole separate situation really depresses me. So I try not to think about it, but still do nearly every minute of the day, she says. I try to convince myself that this whole thing with Kate is just a phase for Greg. Just like I went through with Rich, Kate is pretty and young, she's 26. So you can see here, folks, she's very, of course, jealous of this Kate because Kate now has her man. And oh, by the way, Kate is younger by some 5 years, and I'm guessing she's also prettier than the original poster here. So she says she's like a new play toy for Greg since they were brought together under stressful circumstances. I don't think their love is genuine. I still hold hope that one day Greg and I will reunite, but I wish him and Kate the best. Does anybody really think she wishes Kate and her husband Greg the best, that their relationship works and flourishes? No. She hopes that they break up so that she can try to swoop back in and get her husband. Last week I was advised that my contact with Greg will be limited further, as he advised me we will only be talking about our kids via email starting on Wednesday of this week, Greg said. Kate has been communicating with Rich this way, and he wants to do the same. Hearing this broke me even further. I know Kate had to put him up to this, as he would never cut me off like that. See? Everything now is Kate's fault. Even though Kate is a victim of your affair, OP, you're treating her like she's a villain. As for me, I've recently been spending most of my time decorating my new apartment and making it comfortable, making it a comfortable place for my kids. It's only got 2 bedrooms, so things are a little crowded, but we make it work. I wish I could go back and change the past, but I can't. So now I'm just moving forward. One baby step at a time. That's where things are today with me. Thanks for reading this, Gina. So that's her story. And overall, I think her husband handled things up front pretty well. He immediately addressed the situation with his wife. He separated from her legally. He communicated to everyone about the affair, which is a good thing for him to do, and then he immediately divorced her. Now, where I think he made a mistake is when he confronted that affair, partner up in that office, and he pushed hard and he ended up flipping out the window. Even though that guy charged at him, you got to be very careful in these kinds of situations, because if that guy would have gotten hurt, seriously hurt, or even worse, then he could have been in real hot water with the law there. So that's where I say you got to be very careful and never employ violence. Now, the other place where I think he has made a big mistake is jumping into this relationship with Kate. I see no problem with him dating Kate and having fun with Kate, but jumping into a relationship and now having a child on the way, Kate, I think, is a big mistake because all he's done by doing that is forever cemented the relationship with these four people. He is never now going to get this Rich out of his life because now remember, Rich has a child with Kate. So there's always going to be a connection there. And his ex-wife is always going to be in his life as well because he's got children with her. So these four people, these four adults now, whether they want to or not, are going to be part of each other's lives in some respect for a long, long time. And I think that was a big mistake. So I want to hear from you. How do you think he handled this situation? Would you have done something different? Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you have, how have you handled it? I want to hear from you and hit that like button. Brother kicked me out over sister-in-law's lies. Now they're homeless and want to move into my house. All right, I guess I need to get this off my chest. A few years ago, I was really struggling. I had just finished college, had a not-so-great job, and honestly, life wasn't looking too good for me. My older brother, Tom, who's 9 years older than me, offered me a place to stay with him and his wife, Karen. At the time, I was super grateful. I mean, who wouldn't be? Rent was ridiculously high, and I wasn't making enough to even consider living on my own. Tom had this nice house with a spare room, and he told me I could stay there as long as I needed until I got back on my feet. It felt like a lifeline. So I moved in with them. It wasn't a permanent solution, but I was trying to get myself together, you know? I didn't want to be a burden or anything, so I made sure I helped out around the house as much as possible. I did the cooking, cleaning, ran errands, all that stuff. I wasn't contributing much financially at first because I could barely afford my own groceries, but I pitched in whenever I could. Like if I had some extra cash, I'd buy groceries for the house or take care of the little things they needed. I thought it was going pretty well. At first, everything seemed fine. Karen was nice enough, and Tom and I have always been close, so it felt like I was in a safe place. Karen and I weren't best friends or anything, but I didn't think there was any problem between us. She never really said much, just kind of kept to herself, but I didn't take it personally. She was pregnant at the time, so I figured she just had her own stuff going on, but after about 6 months, things started getting weird. Like, subtle stuff at first. Karen would make these little comments like, "Oh, when the baby comes, we're going to need a lot more space," or "I wonder if we should start thinking about how to turn the guest room into a nursery." You know, hints like that. I kind of got the vibe that she wanted me gone, but Tom kept reassuring me, saying, "Don't worry about it. You can stay as long as you need." I believed him because, well, he's my brother. Why would I think otherwise, right? Then the comments got less subtle. Karen started complaining more openly, saying things like, "It's going to be really hard having a newborn and a third person in the house." I wasn't trying to overstay my welcome, but at the same time, I didn't have anywhere else to go just yet. I had finally gotten a decent job by this point, but it wasn't like I had enough saved up to just pack my bags and leave right away. One day things really started to shift. I remember it clear as day. Karen was sitting in the living room, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. Tom wasn't home yet, and Karen just starts talking to me out of nowhere. She tells me that she's uncomfortable with me living there, that it's affecting her peace of mind, and how she doesn't feel safe with some of the people I hang out with. I was like, "What people?" Because I barely went out, and when I did, it was usually with coworkers or old friends from college. Karen goes, "You know, I heard from Tom that some of your friends are involved in stuff like drugs, and I don't want that around my baby." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not even close to anyone involved in that kind of crap, and I told her that. But she just shrugged like she knew something I didn't. I remember feeling like my stomach dropped because it was so out of left field, but I figured she was just stressed out with the pregnancy and all. I tried to brush it off, but things didn't stop there. After that conversation, Karen got colder. She'd give me these looks, like I was in her way, and barely spoke to me unless it was to drop more passive-aggressive hints about me leaving. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to believe that she'd straight up make things up about me. I mean, it's my brother's wife. What reason would she have to lie? Well, fast forward a couple of weeks, and Tom starts acting distant too. It's not like him, so I asked him one night if everything was okay, and he just said Karen's been really stressed lately. He didn't bring up anything specific, but the vibe was off. Like, it felt like he was hiding something, but I didn't push him on it. So when Karen started acting a bit more distant, I didn't think much of it. I figured she just needed space or was going through her own stuff. But then, she started making these comments. Little things that, in hindsight, were probably meant to push me out without actually saying it outright. Like, she'd mention how small the house felt all of a sudden, or how she needed more room for the baby's stuff. There was one time she even joked, "Maybe you'll be moving out before the baby comes, right?" And then laughed it off like it was no big deal. I remember laughing with her, but deep down I was like, wait, is she serious? It wasn't just the comments, though. She started avoiding me more. If I was in the living room, she'd go upstairs or into another room. I'd try to make conversation, ask her about the pregnancy, if she needed anything, and she'd just brush me off. I was starting to feel like a ghost in the house. The weird part was that Tom never seemed to notice. He was so wrapped up in the baby stuff, planning for the future, that he didn't see what was happening right in front of him. And then there was the day Karen dropped the bomb about me supposedly flirting with her. I still can't wrap my head around it. It was a regular Tuesday. Tom was at work and I had the day off, so I figured I'd do some cleaning around the house. You know, help out since I was staying there for free. Karen was sitting in the living room just scrolling through her phone, not really paying attention to anything. I was in the kitchen wiping down the counters when she suddenly called out, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I walked over thinking she needed help with something, but the look on her face was just weird. She didn't seem upset, but there was something off about her expression, like she was about to drop some serious news on me. So, she started fiddling with her phone. "I've noticed that I don't know how to say this, but you've been acting kinda flirty with me." I literally froze. I didn't even know what to say at first because it was so out of left field. Like what? Me? Flirting? With her? I laughed, thinking she was joking. "Wait, what? Flirty? With you? That's crazy, Karen." But she wasn't laughing. She just stared at me, dead serious. "No, I'm not kidding. Tom mentioned it to me too. He said he noticed it a while back." That's when the pit in my stomach dropped. Tom noticed it? What the hell was she even talking about? I had never, and I mean never, thought of Karen that way. She was my brother's wife, for crying out loud. The idea of flirting with her was insane. "Karen, I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to stay calm. I wouldn't, that's not," but she cut me off. "Look, I'm just telling you what I feel, and honestly, it's making me uncomfortable. I don't think it's a good idea for you to be here anymore, especially with the baby coming." I felt like the room was spinning. I didn't know how to respond. How do you defend yourself against something that never even happened? I wanted to scream, but I just stood there, completely blindsided. "Tom said that?" I finally managed to ask. She nodded, but something about the way she did it felt off. Like she wasn't telling the whole story, but I didn't know what part of it was missing. The rest of that conversation is kind of a blur. Karen kept talking about how it's not personal and it's just for the safety of the family, but all I heard was that she wanted me gone. The whole flirting thing was complete BS, but I didn't know how to prove it. And the fact that she claimed Tom noticed it too, that hurt the most. My own brother thought I was hitting on his wife. It didn't make any sense. After that day, things got real tense in the house. Karen stopped talking to me altogether, and Tom acted like everything was fine, but I knew he knew something was up. I tried to talk to him about it one night, but he just brushed me off, saying, "Karen's been really stressed with the pregnancy. Don't take it personally." Don't take it personally? How could I not take it personally when his wife was accusing me of something so ridiculous? It got worse when Karen started telling Tom that I was involved with bad people. She told him that some of my friends were into drugs, and that she didn't feel comfortable having me around the baby if I was bringing that kind of influence into their home. I barely even had friends over. I didn't have a social life because I was working and saving up to move out. But somehow, Karen had convinced Tom that I was hanging out with sketchy people. I don't know if Tom actually believed her, or if he just didn't want to deal with the drama, but he started acting weird around me too. He'd come home from work and barely say a word to me, like I wasn't even there. It was obvious Karen had gotten into his head, but every time I tried to bring it up, he'd shut me down. "Just give Karen some space," he'd say. "She's going through a lot right now." It didn't matter what I said. Karen had already made up her mind and she was doing everything she could to push me out. And the worst part? She was using my brother to do it. It was like watching someone build a case against you for something you didn't even do, and you're just standing there, powerless to stop it. By this point, I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. I was already looking for apartments, but with the rent prices, it wasn't easy. I didn't have a lot of options, and the last thing I wanted was to end up on the streets. I was trying so hard to be patient, to not rock the boat, but deep down I knew it was only a matter of time before Karen made her final move. And when she did, I wasn't sure if Tom would have my back or if he'd side with her. So it finally happened. I knew it was coming, but when it did, it still hit me like a ton of bricks. Karen had been building up to this for weeks, and I guess I was just holding on to hope that Tom would step in and tell her to cut the crap. But yeah, that didn't happen. I had just gotten home from work, another long day at my new job, and all I wanted to do was relax for a bit. I walked in the door and everything seemed quiet. Too quiet, actually. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like something's off, but you can't put your finger on it right away. I headed towards my room, and that's when I saw it. All my stuff. My clothes, books, random belongings, packed up in boxes and bags, just sitting there in the hallway like trash waiting to be taken out. I stopped in my tracks. My heart started racing, and for a second I thought maybe there was some mistake. Maybe Karen was doing some weird cleaning thing, or I don't know. Maybe Tom was rearranging stuff. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. This wasn't some misunderstanding. I walked into the living room, and there was Tom, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He didn't look at me at first, didn't say anything either, just sat there in this awkward silence. Karen was nowhere to be found, of course, leaving him to do the dirty work. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel my anger bubbling up. Tom sighed, finally looking up at me with this guilty expression, like he was a little kid who got caught doing something wrong. "Karen, she thinks it's time for you to move out," he said. His voice was so quiet, like he was ashamed of even saying it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? You're kicking me out just like that? After everything?" He didn't even try to defend himself. He just nodded, looking at the floor. "It's not like that," he mumbled. "It's just, Karen's stressed with the pregnancy, and she feels uncomfortable with you being here. You know, with everything going on." Everything going on? What did that even mean? I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't caused any problems. All I did was live there, help out, and keep to myself as much as possible. And now I was being thrown out because Karen felt uncomfortable. It was such BS, and Tom knew it too, but he wasn't going to stand up to her. I could see that clearly now. "So that's it? You're just throwing me out on the street?" I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. "Over some lies Karen's been feeding you? I've done nothing but help around here, Tom. You know that." Tom stood up, running a hand through his hair, still avoiding eye contact. "I'm not throwing you on the street," he said. "I'll help you find a place. We can cover your security deposit, maybe even the first month's rent. It's not like we're abandoning you." Not abandoning me? It felt like the exact opposite. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking for some respect. For my own brother to have my back instead of just rolling over because his wife wanted me gone. "Karen said I was flirting with her, Tom. She said I was hanging out with bad people. You really believe that?" I asked, desperate for some kind of acknowledgement that he knew the truth. He didn't answer right away, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. He either believed her, or he was too scared to disagree with her. Either way, I was screwed. "Look," he finally said, "Karen's been really stressed, and with the baby coming, we just need a little more peace in the house. You've been great, and I appreciate everything you've done, but this is what's best for everyone." What's best for everyone? What about what's best for me? I wanted to scream, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. Karen had made up her mind, and Tom wasn't going to fight her on it. I was being pushed out, and there was nothing I could do to change it. I stood there for a second, trying to process it all. Part of me wanted to just storm out and never look back, but I had nowhere else to go. I didn't have savings for a new place yet, and I definitely didn't have any family I could turn to, at least not after this. Tom was the only one I thought I could count on, and now that bridge was burning right in front of me. "When do I have to be out?" I asked, my voice flat and defeated. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Karen was hoping by the end of the week," he said, almost like he was ashamed to even say it. The end of the week. That was 4 days away. 4 freaking days to find somewhere to live, pack up my life, and figure out how to survive on my own. "Right," I muttered, shaking my head. "Thanks for the heads up, I guess." I turned around, heading back to the hallway where all my stuff was piled up. I could feel Tom watching me, but I didn't bother looking back at him. What was the point? He wasn't going to change his mind, and even if he wanted to, Karen wouldn't let him. I started picking up the boxes, dragging them back into my room, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I spent the next few days frantically searching for apartments, reaching out to anyone I could think of who might be able to let me crash for a while. It wasn't easy. Rent was high, and I didn't have enough saved up yet to afford anything decent. I kept thinking maybe Tom would come to his senses. Maybe he'd talk to Karen and realize how unfair this whole situation was. But every time I saw them together, it was clear that wasn't happening. Karen avoided me completely, barely even acknowledging my existence. And Tom? He was acting like this was all perfectly normal. By the time Friday rolled around, I still hadn't found a place. I was packing the last of my things into boxes, trying not to cry, when Tom knocked on the door. He stood there awkwardly for a minute, holding an envelope in his hand. "Here," he said, handing it to me. "It's for the security deposit and first month's rent. I hope it helps." I took the envelope without saying anything. I didn't want his money. What I wanted was for my brother to stand up for me, to tell Karen she was wrong, and that I didn't deserve to be treated like this. But that wasn't going to happen, and I knew it. I left that weekend with my boxes and bags, feeling more alone than I ever had before. Tom barely even said goodbye. Karen didn't come out at all. I was just gone, out of their lives like I never mattered in the first place. After getting kicked out of Tom's place, I spent the next few months pretty much in survival mode. I had nowhere to go at first, so I started crashing on friends' couches. You ever feel like you're imposing on people, even when they say it's okay? That's how I felt every single day. I was grateful for my friends letting me stay, but I knew deep down I couldn't keep doing it forever. I was just a guest, and they had their own lives to live. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't want to keep bringing up what happened with Tom and Karen. I didn't want people to think I was bitter or stuck on it, but truthfully, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's not like I could just forget that my own brother tossed me out like I was nothing. But whenever someone asked how I was doing, I just smiled and said, "I'm figuring things out," like it wasn't killing me inside. Couch surfing was rough. I couldn't settle anywhere, and I was constantly moving around with all my stuff in boxes and bags. There's something weird about living out of boxes for that long. You feel like you're always on the edge of being thrown out again. I'd pack everything up every time I left for work, just in case. It's like I didn't trust that I'd be welcomed back. It messes with your head living like that. I'll admit, things weren't great for a while. My job was okay, but it didn't pay enough for me to get my own place right away. I was trying to save, but you know how it goes. Every time I thought I was making progress, something would come up that wiped out my savings. Car trouble, bills, groceries. It felt like I was stuck, just treading water and trying not to drown. I thought about calling Tom a few times, asking him for help. But then I'd remember how things ended, and how easily he let Karen push me out. I couldn't go back to him. I couldn't go back to them. The fact that he never even checked on me after I left? That said everything. I wasn't important to him anymore. I was just another problem Karen solved. It's funny, though. You'd think getting thrown out by my own family would have broken me, but somehow it just made me more determined. I decided I wasn't going to rely on anyone else anymore. I was done with people letting me down, done with feeling like I owed anyone for a roof over my head. If I was going to get back on my feet, I was going to do it myself. So I started working harder, picking up extra hours at my job whenever I could. I cut back on everything. No new clothes, no going out, nothing that wasn't necessary. It was tough, but after a few months, I had enough saved up to finally get my own place. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a small one-room studio apartment on the edge of town, but it was mine. No more bouncing from place to place. No more relying on anyone else. I finally had a place to call my own, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I remember the first night in my new apartment. I didn't have much, just a mattress on the floor and a couple of boxes of stuff, but it felt like freedom. It was quiet, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to worry about being kicked out. I didn't have to walk on eggshells or tiptoe around anyone's moods. It was just me, and that was enough. Even though I was proud of myself for getting back on my feet, it didn't take away the hurt. I still thought about Tom and Karen all the time. I thought about how easily they tossed me out when they didn't need me anymore. How Karen's lies about me flirting with her and hanging out with sketchy people were enough to convince Tom to kick me out without even giving me a chance to defend myself. It still stung, even if I was doing better. What made it worse was that no one in my family reached out. Not my parents, not my other siblings. It was like I didn't exist anymore. I guess Tom told everyone his side of the story, and I wasn't part of the picture they cared about. My parents always had this thing about keeping the peace, and I'm sure they thought it was easier to let Tom and Karen do whatever they wanted rather than confront them about what happened. But it still hurt, you know? It felt like I'd been erased from their lives, just like that. I focused on moving forward, though. I didn't have time to sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had bills to pay, and the rent wasn't going to take care of itself. So I kept working, kept grinding, and slowly, things started looking up. I got a promotion at work that helped with my finances. I started decorating my little apartment, making it feel like home. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was proud of how far I'd come. One thing I learned during all this was that you can't depend on anyone else to fix your life. No one's coming to save you, and the people you think will always have your back might be the ones who push you down the hardest. It's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the truth. You've got to look out for yourself, because when it all comes crashing down, the only person you can count on is you. Still, despite everything, there was a part of me that wished things had gone differently with Tom. I missed having a brother. I missed the way things used to be before Karen came into the picture and flipped everything upside down. But I knew I couldn't go back to that. I couldn't forget how they treated me, and I wasn't going to let them back into my life after what they did. They made their choice, and I had to live with mine. I hadn't spoken to Tom in almost a year by the time I felt like I was back on my feet. Every now and then, I'd get a text from him or Karen asking how I was doing or checking in, but I never responded. I couldn't. Not after what they put me through. I figured they'd moved on, too. They had their baby by now, and I'm sure their life was just fine without me in it. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. You don't just treat family like that and expect everything to be okay. I didn't know it at the time, but that whole situation was going to come back around eventually. And when it did, it was going to change everything. It had been about a year since I got my own place and went completely no contact with Tom and Karen. I'd done everything I could to put them behind me, but it's not like you can just erase family from your mind. Every now and then, I'd think about reaching out, but then I'd remember how they tossed me out like I was nothing. The thought of Tom believing Karen's lies still made me sick. Then, one day I got a call. I was sitting at my desk, half listening to a podcast when my phone started ringing. I glanced at the screen, and to my surprise, it was Tom. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, so seeing his name pop up gave me a weird feeling. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. So I did. "Hello?" I answered, trying to sound neutral, not wanting to show any emotion. There was a pause on the other end, and then Tom's voice came through, sounding different. He didn't sound like the confident, put-together older brother I used to know. He sounded desperate. "Hey," he said, "it's me." Yeah, I knew it was him. "What's up?" I replied, not wanting to make this easy for him. Tom hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I'm just going to cut to the chase. We need help. Karen and we're losing the house. The business went under, and we're getting evicted. We've got nowhere else to go." I could feel my heart rate pick up. I hadn't heard from Tom in over a year, and now he was calling because he needed something? After everything they put me through? It was almost laughable. Part of me wanted to hang up right then and there, let them figure it out on their own. But the other part of me, well, it was complicated. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We were hoping—" He paused, like he didn't even believe what he was about to say. "We were hoping you'd let us stay with you, just for a few months, until we get back on our feet." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind raced back to that day, coming home to find all my stuff packed in the hallway. The way Tom just stood there while Karen lied about me flirting with her. And now they wanted to stay with me? In my apartment? I let out a short laugh, more out of disbelief than anything. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "I know how it sounds," Tom replied quickly, like he knew how ridiculous it was. "But we've got 2 kids now. We don't have anywhere else to go. Please, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency." An emergency. So now I was supposed to forget everything and help them because they were in trouble. Where was that energy when I needed a place to stay? When Karen was throwing me out over lies and Tom just stood by and let it happen? "Tom, I don't know what to tell you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You kicked me out when I needed help. Remember that? You and Karen didn't care then. Why should I care now?" There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and for a moment I thought he might hang up. But then he spoke again, and this time his voice was softer, like he was finally starting to get it. "I know," he said. "I know we screwed up. Karen, she was wrong. I was wrong for not standing up for you. I should have never let that happen. I should have had your back." Hearing him admit that gave me a weird mix of satisfaction and anger. It was the apology I had been waiting for, but it also felt too late. Like it didn't matter anymore. The damage was already done. What good was an apology now after all this time? "I needed you, Tom," I said, my voice starting to crack. "I needed my brother, and you let her lie about me. You let her make me out to be some kind of freak like I was flirting with her. You believed her over me." "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry, I really am. But right now, we're desperate. We don't have anyone else to turn to. I'm asking you, as your brother, please, can we stay with you?" I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, trying to figure out what to say. A part of me wanted to tell him to shove it, to let him deal with the consequences of his choices. But another part of me, maybe the part that still cared about family, despite everything, was torn. I'd been through hell when they kicked me out. But did that mean I had to kick them when they were down too? Was it my responsibility to be the bigger person here? I need some time to think about it, I finally said, my voice tight. I understand, Tom replied, sounding relieved that I hadn't slammed the door in his face just yet. Take as much time as you need. I'm really sorry for everything, and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. After we hung up, I just sat there for a while staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to laugh at the irony of the situation. They threw me out without a second thought, and now they were begging me for a place to stay. It felt like some kind of twisted karmic joke. But the truth was, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be that person who holds grudges forever, but at the same time, I didn't want to be walked all over again. If I let them stay, would it just be another situation where they take advantage of me? Or would this be the moment where we all finally grew up and moved past what happened? I thought about it for days. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Tom, reminding me that they didn't have much time left before they had to move out of their house. My parents even got involved, sending me guilt-trippy messages about how family sticks together and how I should let bygones be bygones. But it wasn't that simple. Family sticking together only works when both sides actually give a damn about each other. And for a long time, it felt like I was the only one who cared. Update 1. I sat with the phone in my hand, staring at it like it was going to give me some kind of magical answer. After days of thinking about it, I had finally called Tom back. He didn't pick up right away, so I left him a message telling him I had made my decision, and that he could call me back whenever he got the chance. Part of me felt like a huge weight had been lifted, but the other part was just anxious. Like, whatever was going to happen next would either be a huge mess or something that changed everything between us for good. I wasn't sure which way it was going to go, but I had to stick with my choice. About an hour later, Tom called me back. His voice sounded tense, like he had been holding his breath since I left the message. So, what's your decision? He asked, not even bothering with small talk. I took a deep breath. Look, Tom, I thought about it a lot, I started, trying to keep calm, even though I felt like my heart was going to pound out of my chest. And I can't let you and Karen stay with me. There was silence on the other end, like he wasn't sure he heard me right. Wait, what? You're serious? He finally said, sounding more shocked than angry. After everything, you're really going to turn us away? After everything? I shot back, feeling my voice get sharper. You mean after you kicked me out of your house with no warning, based on lies Karen made up? You threw me out, Tom. I had nowhere to go. So, yeah, I'm serious. I could hear him breathing on the other end, like he was trying to figure out how to respond without blowing up. I told you I was sorry for that. We were under a lot of stress. Karen was pregnant and things were just complicated. Complicated, I repeated, my frustration boiling over. You believed lies about me flirting with your wife and hanging out with drug dealers? You didn't even give me a chance to defend myself. And now, because things are bad for you, I'm supposed to just forget about all that? I'm not asking you to forget, Tom said, his voice more desperate now. I'm asking you to help us. We've got kids now. This isn't just about me or Karen. We're your family. I felt a pang of guilt at that, but I wasn't going to back down, not after everything I'd been through. Family? You weren't thinking about family when you threw me out. You weren't thinking about family when you let Karen lie about me. I had to figure it out on my own, Tom. Now it's your turn. There was another long pause. I could hear the frustration in his breathing again, but this time he didn't argue. He knew I was right. Look, I continued, softening my tone just a little. I'm not saying I don't care, but I can't let you stay with me. I've worked hard to rebuild my life, and I'm finally in a good place. I can't let you and Karen come in and mess that up again. You understand that, right? Yeah, Tom muttered. I get it. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but I wasn't going to budge. I wasn't about to let him guilt-trip me into giving in. I'd come too far for that. I'll help in other ways, I offered, feeling like I had to throw him something. I'll help you find resources or places you can stay. But my home? That's off limits. There was a long silence on the other end, and for a second I thought Tom had hung up. But then he sighed, long and deep, like he was finally accepting it. Okay, he said, his voice quieter now. I understand. I'm not happy about it, but I understand. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. It wasn't easy telling my own brother no, but I had to protect myself first. If I let him and Karen back into my life like that, I knew things would just end up the same as before, and I couldn't handle that again. I really do hope things get better for you guys, I said, trying to end the conversation on a less tense note. I'm sorry things are so hard right now. Yeah, me too, Tom muttered. Thanks for whatever help you can give. We said our awkward goodbyes, and that was that. I hung up the phone and just sat there for a minute, processing everything. I had said no. For once in my life, I had stood up for myself against my own family, and it felt weird. Part of me was proud, but another part was sad. I didn't like the idea of being estranged from Tom forever, but I knew this was the right thing to do. I had to draw the line somewhere. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about that conversation, replaying it in my head. I wasn't sure if Tom was mad at me or if he really understood where I was coming from, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let myself be guilted into something I wasn't comfortable with. My parents, of course, found out about the whole thing and tried to jump in with their family sticks together routine. They couldn't believe I said no, even after I explained everything that had happened with Tom and Karen. It's like they just didn't want to see the bigger picture. You should have helped them, my mom told me during one of our phone calls. They're struggling, and you've always been the one to help. This isn't like you. That last part stung a bit. Maybe it wasn't like me, but maybe that was the point. I'd always been the one to bend over backward for family, no matter how they treated me. But that's exactly why I had to say no this time. I wasn't the same person I was before. I had grown, learned to set boundaries, and this was one of them. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. But I've got to put myself first for once. Tom and Karen can figure it out. My parents didn't really get it, but that didn't surprise me. They weren't the ones who had been kicked out and left to fend for themselves. They weren't the ones who had to rebuild everything from scratch. I was, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel bad for protecting what I'd worked so hard to build. After that, things went quiet for a while. I didn't hear much from Tom or Karen, which was fine with me. They had their own problems to deal with, and I had mine. I helped them find a shelter that could take them in for a while, and that was the last I heard about it. No more desperate calls, no more guilt-tripping texts, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. My parents cut off my college funding. Until I apologized to their golden child, I said one word. Then, everything changed, and now they're begging. So, my parents froze my college tuition on Christmas Eve. Their big power move? Their ultimate checkmate. Apologize to your sister, they said, or kiss your future goodbye. I looked at them, all smug and unified in their matching disappointment, and I said one word. Fine. What they didn't know was that by morning, my room would be stripped clean, my Georgetown transfer already confirmed, and a single email would be sitting in my sister's fiancé's inbox like a ticking time bomb. When I came down with my last box, my sister Natalie turned absolutely white. Please tell me you didn't send it. My dad's face went from confident to confused real quick. Send what? Yeah, that's when everything got interesting. Let me back up and give you the full picture, because this didn't happen overnight. This was 18 years in the making. I grew up in one of those families where love felt like a performance review. You hit your metrics, you got a pat on the head. You missed the mark, you got a lecture about potential and disappointment. At least that's how it worked for me. My sister Natalie operated under a completely different system. Same house, different universe. I figured this out around age 7. Brought home a report card with straight A's and 1 A- in gym. My mother barely looked up from her phone. She asked why I hadn't tried harder. 2 weeks later, Natalie brought home B's and C's, and they took her out for ice cream to celebrate her improvement. I sat at the kitchen table doing homework, listening to the garage door close behind them, and understood exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Cold lesson to learn at 7, but better to learn it early than never, I guess. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Collins, ran a successful accounting firm in suburban Virginia. They lived and breathed appearances. You know the type. The Christmas card family with matching sweaters and practiced smiles. The narrative they sold to the world was 2 accomplished children destined for greatness. The reality behind closed doors was a completely different story. My father built his entire identity around professional success and social positioning. He sat on the country club board, donated to the right charities, worked every room like he was calculating the transactional value of each handshake. My mother was his perfect complement. She hosted dinner parties with magazine-worthy table settings, volunteered at the organizations that mattered, befriended women whose husbands could benefit dad's business. Together, they constructed this facade of family perfection, and maintaining it required total cooperation from their children. Natalie understood this game instinctively. She charmed dad's clients, complimented mom's hosting skills with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm, and presented exactly the image of accomplished young womanhood they wanted to project. Her actual behavior behind closed doors mattered so little compared to her public performance. I absorbed that lesson over years of watching her escape consequences that would have absolutely destroyed me. She was 3 years older, born with this effortless charm that I never inherited. Teachers forgave her late assignments. Boys tripped over themselves around her. She sailed through high school with mediocre grades that never warranted concern, and an uncanny ability to redirect blame. I watched from the sidelines, taking mental notes on survival in a household where favoritism operated as openly as the central heating system. There were moments when the unfairness felt crushing. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. Why were Natalie's failures treated as charming quirks while my minor imperfections became evidence of character flaws? But around 14, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity. I stopped expecting fairness. I started expecting patterns. Once I recognized the predictable, unjust rules of our family dynamics, I could navigate them. Emotion gave way to strategy. Hurt transformed into careful observation. My bedroom became my sanctuary. Maps of distant places covered the walls. Books about people who overcame impossible circumstances filled my shelves. I spent hours researching universities far enough from Virginia that casual parental drop-ins would be impractical. Every essay I wrote, every extracurricular I joined, every test I aced. All of it was another brick in the wall I was building between my present circumstances and my future freedom. By junior year, I had built an entire identity around being Natalie's opposite. Where she was social, I was studious. Where she was reckless, I was calculated. My walls displayed academic trophies. Hers were plastered with concert tickets and party Polaroids. My parents saw Natalie as vibrant, full of life. They saw me as dependable, which loosely translated to invisible. Then, the summer before my senior year, I discovered something that would become my insurance policy. Natalie had been dating Brandon Montgomery, the son of my father's biggest client. Brandon drove a BMW, wore watches that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and treated my sister like a decorative accessory. Their relationship was the pride of my parents' social ambitions. They practically glowed when Brandon came over. Dad would talk investments. Mom would fuss over appetizers like royalty had arrived. The possibility of their daughter marrying into the Montgomery family represented everything they'd worked for, a permanent elevation of the Collins name into genuinely elite social circles. They were so blinded by the potential benefits that they never questioned Natalie's affection for the guy. But I noticed the inconsistencies from day one. Natalie complained about Brandon constantly when our parents weren't around. His conversation skills, his fashion choices, his insufferable habit of talking about sailing. She'd roll her eyes at his texts, cancel plans to meet other guys whose existence she carefully hid. The disconnect between her public performance as the devoted girlfriend and her private contempt was jarring even for someone accustomed to her duplicity. What my parents didn't know was that Natalie had been systematically manipulating Brandon for money. She'd convinced him to fund a supposed investment opportunity that was actually her personal shopping account. Through sweet talk and strategic tears, she'd extracted nearly $40,000 from him in 8 months. I stumbled onto the evidence while borrowing her laptop when mine crashed. Bank statements, text conversations, and the most disturbing thing of all, a detailed spreadsheet tracking her extractions like some twisted game. The spreadsheet truly horrified me. Columns tracking each withdrawal, notes about the emotional manipulation techniques she'd used. One entry read, "Told him my car needed repairs. Cried about feeling like a burden. Got $3,500. Another, investment opportunity pitch. Used business terminology Dad taught me. $8,000 transfer confirmed." She was treating fraud like a project management exercise, complete with running totals and projected future extractions. I sat in her room for nearly an hour, scrolling through months of calculated deception. Brandon wasn't exactly a sympathetic figure with his entitled attitude, but nobody deserved to be systematically exploited by someone pretending to love them. The sheer scale of her manipulation revealed depths of dishonesty that exceeded even my cynical expectations. My first instinct was to tell my parents, to finally present irrefutable evidence of Natalie's true character. That impulse lasted about 30 seconds. 18 years of data told me they would never accept negative information about their golden child. They would minimize, excuse, or somehow blame me for the discovery. The evidence would be dismissed. I would be punished for snooping. So I screenshot everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder. Call it paranoia. Call it preparation. Something told me those files would matter someday. Gathering evidence became almost meditative. Over the following months, whenever opportunity presented itself, her phone unlocked on the counter, her bragging calls with friends that she didn't know I could hear, I documented everything. Each new piece went into my growing digital archive, organized by date, categorized by type of misconduct. I told myself I was just being prudent, maintaining records. The reality was probably more complicated. Part of me wanted validation. proof that my perceptions of our family dynamics weren't paranoid delusions. Another part wanted insurance, protection against future scenarios where Natalie's manipulations might target me directly. And yeah, a small part of me just wanted ammunition, weapons I could deploy if circumstances ever demanded self-defense. Senior year unfolded with the predictable rhythm of college applications and family dinners where my accomplishments were acknowledged with brief nods while Natalie's latest drama commanded the spotlight. She had graduated by then, supposedly attending community college while living at home, though her actual schedule seemed to consist primarily of brunch dates and shopping trips funded by Brandon's ongoing generosity. My college counselor, Mrs. Henderson, became an unexpected ally. She recognized something in me, maybe the exhaustion of constantly performing adequacy in a household that demanded perfection while rewarding mediocrity in my sibling. During our sessions, she encouraged me to aim high, reminding me my record positioned me for schools that had seemed impossible to my freshman self. The acceptance letters arrived like permission slips for a life I'd barely dared to imagine. Georgetown's thick envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with possibility and the promise of distance. I opened it alone in my bedroom, reading the words 3 times before allowing myself to believe they were real. For the first time in 18 years, something I wanted had materialized through my own effort, rather than parental approval or sibling manipulation. I applied to 12 universities, got into 10. Georgetown became my top choice, a prestigious program that would put physical distance between me and the Collins household dynamics. My parents agreed to fund my education with the same lukewarm enthusiasm they applied to everything involving me. It was an investment in the family reputation, not an expression of parental pride. The tuition conversation still replays in my memory with perfect clarity. My father behind his desk, reviewing the financial aid package, calculating our family's contribution like a business acquisition, evaluating return on investment. My mother suggested a state school, something closer where they could keep an eye on me. The implication that I needed supervision while Natalie had been trusted independently was not lost on me. I pushed back gently, citing Georgetown's rankings, framing my ambitions in the language of reputation enhancement they understood. They eventually agreed, though my father made sure I knew continued funding depended on sustained academic performance and appropriate behavior. Translation: stay useful, stay quiet, don't embarrass us. The fall semester of my freshman year proved transformative. For the first time, I existed outside my sister's shadow. Professors knew my name for my contribution, not as Natalie's little brother. I made friends who appreciated my dry humor and fierce loyalty. I maintained a near-perfect GPA while working part-time at the campus library. Those months tasted like freedom, like the person I was always meant to become finally had room to breathe. My roommate Ryan, whose family had recently moved to the DC area, became my first real friend outside the social ecosystem my parents had cultivated. His family actually enjoyed spending time together. Siblings supported each other. Parents expressed pride without conditions attached. Hearing his stories about holidays felt like anthropological research into an alien culture. He listened to my carefully edited stories about home with growing concern, eventually telling me my family dynamics sounded deeply unhealthy. Nobody had ever named it so directly before. The library job gave me more than pocket money. It gave me structure, competence outside academics, and a community of student workers who looked out for each other. My supervisor, Tom, taught me about financial independence in ways my accounting executive father never had. Credit building, emergency funds, the importance of maintaining resources nobody else could control. Those lessons would prove invaluable sooner than I expected. Thanksgiving break shattered the illusion that distance could protect me from family dysfunction. I returned home to discover Natalie was engaged to Brandon. My mother had already begun planning an elaborate summer wedding. The household buzzed with excitement that physically pushed me to the periphery of every conversation. The engagement ring was obscene, a diamond so large it looked theatrical. Natalie displayed it at every opportunity, angling her hand to catch the light, resting it conspicuously on surfaces where guests couldn't miss it. Brandon beamed with proprietary satisfaction. The whole performance made my stomach turn, knowing what I knew. Wedding planning consumed every conversation. My mother treated the event like her personal coronation. Venue scouting, catering tastings, dress shopping dominated every discussion. My father talked about the guest list in terms of networking opportunities, calculating which clients and contacts deserved invitations to what he clearly viewed as a professional showcase. Nobody asked about my semester, my classes, my friends, my adjustment to college life. I sat through 3 days of wedding discussion, offering opinions only when directly solicited, otherwise just observing the machinery of family dysfunction operating at peak efficiency. During the holiday dinner, Natalie announced she wanted me to be in the wedding party. The request came wrapped in performative sibling affection, complete with tears and declarations about our bond. My parents beamed. I agreed, because refusing would have caused the kind of scene that would follow me back to campus in the form of disappointed phone calls and guilt-laden care packages. The real purpose behind the invitation revealed itself over the following weeks. Natalie started calling constantly, assigning tasks that had nothing to do with wedding planning and everything to do with maintaining her elaborate deception. She wanted me to cover for her when she missed bridal appointments to meet other guys. She expected me to help manage the narrative around her finances when Brandon's family started asking questions about the investment returns she'd promised. The calls came at all hours, interrupting study sessions and library shifts with increasingly desperate demands. She needed me to confirm her alibi for a Saturday when she told Brandon she was visiting grandma. She wanted me to memorize details about a fabricated investment scheme for Brandon's dad at the holiday party. She needed help convincing our parents that certain credit card charges were wedding-related rather than personal shopping sprees. Each request pushed me further into complicity. Refusing felt impossible given family dynamics that had conditioned me to accommodate. This wasn't just observing her deception anymore. I was actively participating. The stress started affecting everything: my sleep, my appetite, my ability to concentrate. Ryan noticed. He confronted me one evening in our dorm room, demanding to know what was happening with my family. Why did I shrink every time my phone rang? What burden was I carrying that was eating me alive? I told him everything. The years of favoritism, Natalie's manipulation scheme, her current demands for my complicity. Speaking the truth aloud to someone who actually believed me felt like releasing pressure from a valve that had been sealed for 18 years. I played along with Natalie's requests, but I documented everything. More screenshots joined my cloud folder, recorded phone calls where she explicitly asked me to lie, text messages outlining her schemes with shocking clarity. The folder grew thick with evidence while my patience grew dangerously thin. Ryan helped me think through contingency plans during long late-night conversations. He researched transfer options and financial aid alternatives while I focused on coursework. His family's stability had given him practical knowledge about navigating institutional systems that my privileged but dysfunctional upbringing never provided. Together, we mapped out scenarios and prepared for possibilities I hoped would never materialize. The Georgetown Alternative Program emerged from one of those research sessions, a modified track for students facing unexpected financial challenges. Reduced tuition, flexible scheduling, same degree. I applied quietly, telling no one. It was insurance, not a plan. The acceptance arrived in early December. Another secret filed away for potential future use. Christmas Eve arrived with the manufactured cheer my mother excelled at creating. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine. Lights twinkled. Appetizers awaited guests for our annual holiday party. I'd been home 3 days, counting the hours until I could escape back to campus, back to the life I was building without them. The party represented everything my parents valued: appearance over substance, performance over authenticity, social positioning over genuine connection. Guests arrived in expensive cars, wearing designer labels, carrying hostess gifts that screamed wealth. My mother circulated with practiced grace. My father worked the room with professional intensity. Natalie displayed her ring to anyone who showed interest. I stationed myself near the refreshments, nursing sparkling cider, making small talk with relatives I barely recognized. My cousin Kevin found me there. He commented that I seemed more confident, more settled. The observation touched something tender, a reminder that personal growth was visible to people who cared enough to notice. Brandon's family arrived fashionably late, making an entrance that drew the entire room's attention. His mother, Victoria, wore a statement necklace that probably cost more than my semester's textbooks. His father, Charles, radiated that particular smugness of inherited wealth, immediately engaging my dad in conversation about market trends. Brandon gravitated toward Natalie with the proprietary air of someone showing off a recent acquisition. Then, the trouble started. It began innocently enough. Victoria Montgomery cornered me near the punch bowl. She started asking pointed questions about Natalie. She'd noticed inconsistencies in the investment story. Unexplained purchases on credit card statements Brandon thought were private. A pattern of behavior that didn't align with the sweet girl her son had presented. Her questions were surgical, precise. The inquiries of someone who'd built a successful career detecting financial irregularities. She mentioned she'd worked in forensic accounting before retiring. That detail sent ice through my veins. This woman possessed the skills to unravel Natalie's schemes independently. She wasn't asking me for information. She was testing whether I would confirm suspicions she'd already formed. The moment stretched as I calculated my options. Deflecting might work short-term, but could raise more suspicions. Lying directly felt impossible under Victoria's penetrating gaze. Telling the truth would detonate a bomb that would reshape my family dynamics permanently. A year and a half of accumulated frustration. 18 years of suppressed resentment. Months of being forced into complicity. All of it pressed against my teeth. demanding release. I should have deflected. Every survival instinct I developed screamed at me to smile, redirect, protect the family narrative at all costs. Instead, something in me just broke. I told Victoria her instincts were correct. I didn't provide specifics, didn't offer evidence, just a confirmation. The woman her son planned to marry was not who she appeared to be. Then I excused myself and walked away, heart pounding with the terrifying thrill of honesty. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Victoria pulled Brandon aside. Brandon confronted Natalie. Natalie dissolved into theatrical tears and pointed her manicured finger directly at me. Within an hour, the Christmas Eve party had cleared out. I stood in my father's study facing a tribunal of parental fury. My mother's face was blotchy red, a physical manifestation of the embarrassment she considered worse than any actual wrongdoing. My father stood behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence he'd already decided. Natalie occupied the leather armchair usually reserved for important clients, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue she didn't need. The accusations came fast and sharp. I was jealous of my sister's happiness. I was sabotaging her future because I couldn't stand to see her succeed. I had always been difficult, always resentful, always looking to tear down the family rather than build it up. My father declared I had embarrassed him in front of his most important client, potentially damaging a business relationship that had taken years to cultivate. I tried to defend myself, explained Natalie's actual behavior, the money she'd stolen, the lies, the evidence I'd gathered. My words bounced off walls of parental denial like they were made of concrete. Natalie cried harder. My mother accused me of fabricating stories to deflect from my own cruelty. The patterns held. They always held. The verdict came just before midnight. My father announced my tuition payments would be suspended immediately until I provided a full, sincere apology to Natalie, to Brandon, and to both sets of parents for my appalling behavior. Furthermore, I would spend the remainder of winter break writing letters of apology to everyone who had witnessed my disgraceful accusations at the party. Only after completing these requirements to their satisfaction would they consider continuing to fund my education. The threat landed with the impact he intended, a financial guillotine suspended above my future. Without their tuition payments, I'd have to withdraw from Georgetown, abandon the life I was building, return to this household in defeat. My father's expression suggested he believed he had checkmated me, that no 18-year-old could possibly have prepared for this contingency. Natalie watched from her chair with barely concealed triumph. She had played the victim perfectly, crying on cue, denying everything with practiced conviction, redirecting parental anger toward me with the skill of a lifelong manipulator. This was her arena, the family dynamic she had mastered while I was still learning to walk. She expected me to crumble, to apologize, to resume my assigned role as the lesser child, grateful for whatever scraps of approval might fall my way. My mother stood slightly behind my father, her expression harder to read. Something in her eyes suggested discomfort with the harshness of his ultimatum, a flicker of maternal concern that she quickly suppressed in favor of presenting a united front. She had spent over 2 decades supporting my father's decisions, and breaking that pattern now would cost her more than supporting her younger son ever could. They expected tears. They anticipated bargaining, pleading, the desperate scrambling of a dependent child, faced with the loss of everything he'd worked toward. What they got instead was a single word delivered with complete calm: fine. I turned and walked out of the study, up the stairs, into my childhood bedroom. Behind me, I could hear my mother asking my father if they'd been too harsh, if perhaps they should reconsider. My father's response was confident and dismissive. He'll come around by morning. He has no other choice. What my father didn't know was that I had been preparing for this exact scenario since the moment I discovered my sister's secrets. Not consciously planning, perhaps, but building the infrastructure of independence piece by piece for 18 months. A savings account funded by my library job and summer earnings held enough to cover 1 semester's tuition at a less expensive program. More importantly, I had researched transfer options extensively during the fall semester, identifying Georgetown's lesser-known alternative program that offered reduced tuition for students willing to complete their degrees through a combination of online and in-person coursework. The preparation had been Ryan's idea initially, framed as responsible financial planning rather than escape preparation. He helped me open the savings account at a bank my parents had no connection to, routing deposits through a system they couldn't monitor or freeze. We calculated exactly how much I would need for various scenarios, from simple tuition gaps to complete financial independence. The spreadsheet we created felt like a lifeline during the months of increasing pressure from Natalie's demands. My acceptance to the modified program had been sitting in my email for 3 weeks, a backup plan I hoped I'd never need to activate. That night, I submitted my confirmation and paid the deposit with my own money. Then I began packing with the methodical efficiency of someone who had mentally rehearsed this escape dozens of times. The process of dismantling my childhood bedroom took approximately 4 hours. I worked quietly, systematically, removing everything that mattered while leaving behind the generic furniture and decorations my mother had selected. Clothes went into suitcases I'd stored in the back of my closet. Books sorted into boxes I'd hidden in the garage 2 days earlier, anticipating this possibility. My laptop, the device containing access to years of carefully gathered evidence, was secured in my carry-on bag where it would never leave my sight. By 6 a.m., my room had been stripped of everything that defined me as a person, clothes folded into suitcases, books boxed and labeled for shipping. The laptop wiped clean of any family photos I might have been tempted to keep. I had already arranged for a rideshare to take me to the train station, where a ticket to Washington would carry me toward a future that no longer depended on Colin's approval. Ryan had offered his family's guest room until student housing opened, a generosity that still moves me when I consider how little he owed me beyond friendship. His parents, who had relocated to the DC suburbs just 2 years prior, welcomed the arrangement without hesitation, apparently accustomed to their son collecting strays who needed temporary shelter from difficult circumstances. The knowledge that a warm bed waited in Arlington provided comfort during those dark early morning hours when doubt threatened to overwhelm determination. The confrontation came earlier than expected. I was carrying the last box downstairs when I encountered my entire family gathered in the living room, still in their pajamas, clearly awakened by the sounds of my departure. The scene would have been almost comical under different circumstances. My father stood with his arms crossed, wearing plaid pajama pants and a Georgetown dad t-shirt he'd purchased during move-in weekend. My mother clutched her robe closed at the throat, hair mussed from sleep, makeup absent. For the first time I could remember seeing her in front of other people. Natalie had positioned herself on the couch, already crying preemptively, tissue in hand. My mother spoke first, her voice carrying the brittle quality of someone struggling to maintain composure. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing, where I possibly imagined I could go, whether I had completely lost my mind overnight. I set down the box and explained calmly that I was leaving. My transfer had been approved. My first semester was already paid. I had a place to stay with a friend from campus until student housing opened in January. Everything was arranged, and I would be gone within the hour. The words landed like physical blows, each sentence visibly impacting my parents' understanding of their position. My father's negotiating leverage had evaporated. His ultimatum, delivered with such confidence mere hours earlier, had been rendered meaningless by preparation he never imagined his overlooked younger son capable of executing. I watched understanding dawn across their faces, the realization that I had been planning for this possibility while they assumed I had no options. My father's business mind was already calculating the implication, the loss of control, the narrative complications, the social embarrassment of having a son publicly reject family support. My mother seemed caught between concern and confusion, unable to reconcile the obedient child she thought she knew with the independent man standing before her. The color drained from my father's face as the full scope of my words registered. He had positioned the tuition threat as a negotiating tool, never genuinely believing I had alternatives. The realization that his leverage had evaporated visibly rattled him. Natalie had been watching me with growing unease, her eyes tracking the boxes, processing the scope of my preparations. When she finally spoke, her voice came out small and strained. "Please tell me you didn't send it." The room went silent. My mother looked between her children, confusion creasing her forehead. My father's calculated expression shifted into something approaching genuine fear. "Send what?" he asked. I let the question hang in the air for a moment, savoring the reversal of power dynamics that had governed my entire life. Then I explained. I had emailed Brandon directly. Attached was every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past 18 months. The bank statements, the text conversations, the spreadsheet tracking stolen money, the recorded phone calls where Natalie explicitly detailed her manipulation strategy. The email, I told them, had been scheduled to send automatically at midnight unless I manually canceled it. Given that I had been occupied with family accusations and packing, cancellation had slipped my mind entirely. By now, Brandon had certainly reviewed the contents. And given the Montgomery family's tendency toward early rising, I suspected they had seen everything as well. This detail wasn't entirely accurate. I had actually sent the email manually at approximately 2 a.m. after confirming my transfer and packing the first round of boxes. But the scheduled send story provided better dramatic framing and plausible deniability about my intent. In truth, I had made a deliberate choice to expose Natalie's schemes, knowing full well what consequences would follow. The evidence package had taken hours to compile properly. I organized documents chronologically, added explanatory notes for context, and included a cover letter expressing regret that Brandon had been deceived by someone he trusted. The presentation was professional, thorough, and devastating. No reasonable person could review those materials and conclude anything other than systematic fraud. My mother made a sound that fell somewhere between a gasp and a moan. My father grabbed his phone and began frantically dialing, presumably attempting damage control with Brandon's family. Natalie simply stared at me, her face cycling through shock, fury, and something that might have been grudging recognition. The phone call connected briefly before Charles Montgomery's voice, tight with controlled rage, delivered a succinct message. The engagement was terminated. Their family attorneys would be in contact regarding repayment of misappropriated funds. The business relationship between Montgomery Industries and Collins Accounting was under immediate review. The call ended with a decisive click that seemed to echo through the silent living room. My father's face had gone gray. The implications of Charles's words registered with devastating clarity. Montgomery Industries represented approximately 30% of his firm's annual revenue. Losing that account would require layoffs, restructuring, potentially even closure. His golden daughter's schemes hadn't just embarrassed the family. They had threatened his entire professional legacy. I picked up my final box and walked toward the front door. My rideshare was 2 minutes away. The train departed in 45 minutes. Georgetown awaited, along with a life built on my own terms rather than conditional family approval. My father's voice stopped me at the threshold. He demanded that I stay, that we discuss this rationally, that I understand the consequences of what I had done. His tone had shifted from authoritative to almost pleading, a transition I had never witnessed in 18 years of living under his roof. I turned back one final time. I told him that consequences were exactly what I understood. Natalie had stolen $40,000 from a man who trusted her. She had used me as a prop in her deceptions for months. When I tried to tell the truth, I was threatened with financial ruin, while she was cradled in parental protection. The consequences I had triggered were simply the ones that should have occurred from the beginning. The car arrived as I finished speaking. I loaded my boxes into the trunk, slid into the back seat, and directed the driver toward the station. Through the rear window, I watched my family standing on the front porch in their pajamas, still processing the implosion of the carefully constructed reality they had maintained for so long. The weeks that followed brought scattered updates from mutual acquaintances and distant relatives who couldn't resist sharing gossip. Brandon had broken off the engagement immediately. His family demanded full repayment. My father's business relationship with Charles Montgomery collapsed entirely. Natalie had moved back home in disgrace, her social circle evaporating as word spread about her behavior. My cousin Kevin became an unexpected source of detailed information during those weeks. He texted regularly with updates about the family fallout, taking vicarious satisfaction in watching dynamics he'd observed from the periphery finally implode. Through him, I learned my parents had attempted to spin the narrative as a misunderstanding, a family dispute blown out of proportion by an ungrateful younger son. The Montgomery family's attorneys quickly disabused them of any hope that narrative would succeed. When Natalie's former friends began distancing themselves as details leaked through the suburban gossip network, several reached out to me directly. They admitted they'd suspected her of various deceptions over the years and expressed relief that someone had finally held her accountable. The messages were validating but also sad confirmation that her manipulative patterns had been visible to observant outsiders, while my parents remained willfully blind. My parents attempted contact several times during January. Phone calls went to voicemail. Emails remained unread. A letter arrived at my campus address, which I returned unopened. I had no interest in reconciliation on terms that would require me to apologize for telling the truth. By February, I had established a new rhythm. Classes demanded my focus. Friends provided genuine support. The modified program actually suited my learning style better than the traditional track, allowing me to work more hours while still progressing toward my degree. Financial independence tasted like cheap coffee and ramen noodles, but also like dignity and self-respect. Ryan's family hosted me for 3 weeks in Arlington before housing opened, treating me with warmth that felt almost overwhelming. His mother made enormous breakfasts and asked genuine questions about my classes and interests. His father offered advice about financial planning, with none of the transactional undertones that characterized my own father's guidance. Watching their family interact provided a template for what healthy dynamics could look like, information I filed away for future reference. Returning to campus felt like coming home in a way my parents' house never had. My tiny dorm room became a sanctuary where I could finally exhale. The first night back, I sat on my bed and processed everything for nearly an hour. The weight I'd been carrying for years finally starting to lift. My Uncle Frank, my father's brother, who had always existed somewhat outside the family dynamics, reached out in early March. He'd heard the entire story from multiple perspectives and wanted me to know he supported my decision. More practically, he offered to co-sign a private student loan that would ease my financial pressure without strings attached to parental expectations. I accepted gratefully. Spring semester ended with honors. Summer brought an internship at a small consulting firm where my work ethic and analytical skills earned genuine praise rather than grudging acknowledgement. I rented a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood that required 3 locks on the door, but allowed me to walk to work without relying on anyone else's generosity. The consulting internship opened doors I hadn't known existed. My supervisor, a guy named Robert, who had built his career despite his own family complications, recognized something familiar in my determination. He became a mentor in ways that extended far beyond professional development, teaching me how to navigate corporate dynamics, how to advocate for myself effectively, how to build a reputation based on competence rather than connection. By the end of summer, he had offered me a part-time position during the school year that would cover most of my remaining expenses. My apartment, despite its size limitations and questionable neighborhood, represented freedom in physical form. I decorated with thrift store finds and plants that somehow survived my irregular watering schedule. Ryan visited during a weekend trip from campus, pronouncing the space tiny but perfect, and helping me assemble a bookshelf that had defeated my solo efforts. The satisfaction of paying rent with money I had earned myself never grew old. The first anniversary of my Christmas Eve departure came and went. I celebrated by signing a lease on a slightly better apartment, one that only needed 2 locks instead of 3. Around month 8, Natalie sent me a message, long paragraph about personal growth and sibling bonds, and hoping we could reconnect. I sent back 2 sentences, wished her well, said I wasn't interested. She never replied, saved me the trouble of blocking her. My parents stayed silent until graduation day. They didn't show up, but a card arrived with a $10,000 check and a note about being proud. I deposited the money, sent a 2-line thank you, and got back to packing for my new job in Boston. The consulting firm had offered me a full-time position. Robert had gone to bat for me with the partners, and they created a junior analyst role that started 3 weeks after I walked across that stage. I shook hands with administrators who had no idea about my family situation, collected my diploma, and caught a flight the next morning. The real update came about 2 years later. I was at my desk when Kevin texted me a link to a local Virginia news article. My father's accounting firm had been hit with a lawsuit. Turned out the Montgomery situation had just been the first domino. After losing their biggest client, Dad had gotten desperate, started cutting corners, fudging numbers for other clients to keep them happy. One of those clients got audited by the IRS, and the whole thing unraveled fast. The article mentioned potential criminal charges, license revocation, the works. I read it twice, then closed the browser and went back to my spreadsheet. Not my circus anymore. Kevin kept me updated over the following months. Dad avoided prison, but lost his CPA license permanently. The firm dissolved. My parents had to sell the house, the big one with the 3-car garage and the professionally landscaped yard that had hosted all those Christmas parties. They moved into a condo. My mother started working part-time at a retail store. My father, the man who had lectured me about ROI and professional reputation my entire childhood, was now doing freelance bookkeeping for small businesses who didn't know his history. Natalie, meanwhile, had been forced to get an actual job when the family money dried up. She worked at a real estate office doing admin work. No more brunch dates. No more shopping sprees. Kevin said she'd gained weight and stopped posting on social media entirely. The Montgomery family got their $40,000 back, plus interest. Their attorneys had made sure of that before the firm collapsed. I ran into Brandon Montgomery exactly once, about 3 years after everything went down. Conference in Chicago. I was there representing my firm. He was there with his father's company. He recognized me across the hotel lobby. Walked over. I braced for awkwardness. Instead, he shook my hand and thanked me. Said that email had been the wake-up call he needed. He'd been so blinded by Natalie's act that he never saw the patterns. After the breakup, he'd done some serious self-reflection about why he'd been such an easy target. He was engaged now, to a woman he'd met through work. Someone his mother actually approved of, he said, with a slight smile. I told him I was glad things worked out. We exchanged business cards and went our separate ways. I doubt we'll ever use them, but the interaction felt like a final closing of that chapter. The last time I saw my family was at my grandmother's funeral, 3 years ago now. I flew in for the service, kept to myself, sat in the back row. My parents were upfront with Natalie. They looked older, smaller. My father had developed a stoop I didn't remember. After the burial, Natalie caught me in the parking lot, asked if we could talk. I gave her 5 minutes. She told me losing everything had forced her to actually look at herself. She had a steady job now. Small apartment, rescue dog. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. She wasn't asking for money or favors. She just wanted me to know she understood now why I did what I did. I told her I appreciated her saying that. Then I got in my rental car and drove to the airport. She texted me on my birthday that year. I sent back a thumbs up emoji. That's about the extent of our relationship now, and I'm fine with that. My parents send Christmas cards. I send them back. We've had exactly 2 phone calls in 5 years, both under 3 minutes, both painfully awkward. They've never apologized. I've never asked them to. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. My sister set my house on fire. After I refused to transfer the deed to her, my parents begged me to drop the charges because she has a child, but the judge didn't agree. And watching her finally learn that actions have price tags was the only closure I ever got. Hey Reddit! So I saved for 7 years, bought my own house, fixed it up with my own hands, and thought, cool, life's finally stabilizing. My family took that as a personal challenge. Before we get to the part where everything literally goes up in flames, let me start from the beginning. My name's Lucian. I'm in my early 30s, and I work in operations management for a mid-sized company. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. Long hours, problem solving, keeping things from falling apart. That's pretty much how I've lived my whole life anyway, being the one who figures it out. In my family, that turned into me becoming the responsible one, which really meant the one nobody checked on because he'll be fine. My parents, Donald and Paris, always acted like I was born knowing what I was doing. If I struggled, they assumed I'd handle it. Meanwhile, my younger sister Alora was treated like a fragile collectible. Dust her off, keep her safe, don't let her get overwhelmed. Every decision she made, even the questionable ones, was praised as brave or stressful, or a lot for her to handle. I stopped expecting fairness years ago. Anyway, after 7 years of saving every spare cent, skipping vacations, taking on extra overtime whenever I could, I finally bought a house. Nothing crazy, just a 3-bedroom ranch on the edge of town. Most people would have turned away because it needed a lot of work, but I knew I could make something solid out of it if I was patient. The place had old paint peeling like thin paper, floors that looked like someone dragged metal furniture across them for a decade, and a kitchen with cabinets so warped I could see daylight through the seams. But it was mine. No roommates, no landlords, no shared walls. For the first time, I walked into a space and felt, not proud exactly, more like relieved. Like the years of eating cheap meals and fixing my own car might finally start meaning something. Renovating the house became my second full-time job. I'd work a 10-hour shift, come home, change shirts, and dive into whatever problem the house threw at me. I watched tutorial after tutorial until my eyes burned. Some nights I fell asleep on the floor with tools scattered around me. My shoulders ached for weeks. Weekends were for bigger projects, redoing the bathroom, scraping old linoleum, fixing the sagging deck. My friend Alonzo came by to help with the heavier stuff. He's been my best friend since high school and has seen enough of my family to understand why I'm the way I am. He kept joking that the house would be my proof of survival after years of being the background character in my own family. His words weren't wrong. When I finally invited my parents to see the progress, they acted proud in that muted way they do when they don't want to make a big deal out of something. My dad looked around and said, "You always were handy, son." Like it was obvious I'd renovate an entire house alone. My mom smiled and said it was nice. Not amazing, not impressive, just nice. They meant well, I know they did, but it felt more like they were checking a task off a list. If the same work had come from Alora, they would have thrown a party with decorations and speeches. Speaking of Alora, my parents still bring up her wedding like it was the crowning event of the decade. It's been years, but they talk about it constantly. The colors, the venue, how magical it was, how proud they were of their girl. It wasn't until much later that I realized how much they helped pay for it. I never got that kind of enthusiasm or support. When I hinted once that the down payment was rough on me, my parents said they wished they could help more equally, but Alora needed it at the time. Like need only counts when it's hers. But the thing is, I didn't buy the house to win points with anyone. I bought it because I wanted something that couldn't be taken away or reinterpreted into someone else's story. Still, when I stood outside and looked at the house after finishing the last of the major work, I expected to feel like part of something bigger. Instead, I just felt steady, solid, like I'd finally built something that belonged entirely to me. The problem was, I didn't realize yet that the people around me didn't see it that way. To me, it was a home. To my family, it was simply available. And that difference is where everything went wrong. I planned the housewarming to be small, 10, maybe 12 people tops. Just family, Alonzo, and 2 coworkers who helped me move the heavy stuff. Nothing fancy. I ordered a few pizzas, set out some folding chairs, because the living room furniture hadn't arrived yet, and figured it would be a simple afternoon where people saw the work I'd put in. Elora showed up 20 minutes early with 15 people I didn't know. They crowded through the front door like it was some open event. I barely had time to process it before Paris clapped her hands and said it was so sweet that Elora brought extra family energy. I opened my mouth to say something, but Donald beat me to it with, "It's family. Stop being weird, Lucian. More people means more love." It didn't feel like love. It felt like siege warfare. Elora strolled in like she was the host, not me. Her toddler son Bentley was on her hip, and she immediately let him run loose in the house. The strangers she brought wandered around, opening cabinets and complimenting things that didn't need compliments, like the hallway light switch. Her husband, Dario, trailed in last. He had that expression he always wears, chin slightly lifted, eyes scanning the room like he's evaluating a business investment he didn't pay into. He gave a slow nod, like he approved the layout, which annoyed me more than I expected. While people settled in, Elora started making comments that sounded like jokes, but didn't land like them. "Wow, Lucian, 3 bedrooms. What exactly are you planning here? A bachelor compound?" I forced a small smile. She kept going. "It's kind of wild. One guy with all this space? What are you gonna do? Talk to the walls? Must be nice having no real responsibilities." A few people chuckled. I didn't. Donald joined in with his version of helpful commentary. "Well, you do have extra space. Elora's just pointing out the obvious." Paris added her own version. "I always said you'd grow into something like this when you finally settle down. Maybe it'll push you to think long term." I didn't know what to say to that. They made it sound like I'd bought a toy instead of a home. We started the house tour, which I hadn't wanted to do yet, but Elora insisted. She walked ahead of the group, opening doors like she was inspecting property she already owned. When she entered the first bedroom, she turned to her crowd and said, "This would be perfect for Bentley. Look at that natural light. He needs sunlight." I blinked, thinking she was kidding. She wasn't. Dario leaned against the doorframe, smirking like everything made perfect sense to him. He said, "Yeah, I can see this fitting our needs pretty well." Our needs. He said it like he'd already moved in. Alonzo stayed by my side the whole time. He watched the scene unfold with this tight expression. He wasn't wrong. Elora kept treating each room like she was shopping for a child she didn't bother to supervise. Bentley was dragging a plastic toy across the hardwood floors I spent 3 weekends sanding and sealing. Every scrape made my stomach drop. Nobody stopped him, not even Elora, who was too busy explaining how she'd arrange furniture in Bentley's future room. By the time we reached the kitchen, one of Elora's extra guests had taken it upon himself to open the fridge and ask if there were more drinks. I calmly told him to please stop going through my things. Instead of apologizing, he laughed and said, "Elora said this place was basically family property." I stood there, not sure if I misheard him. Elora shot me a look like I was being dramatic. "Relax, Lucian. Nobody cares about a fridge. It's just family." Alonzo muttered something under his breath that sounded like a warning. I almost asked him to repeat it. As the tour wrapped up, I realized I'd barely spoken during any of it. The whole event turned into Elora walking ahead, pointing, assigning, redesigning, and acting like the house was some kind of community resource I'd selfishly locked away. People had barely finished their pizza when Elora clapped her hands loud enough to cut every conversation in half. She stood in the center of my living room like she was about to host a seminar. I froze mid-sentence. Alonzo looked over from the couch, and even some of the strangers she brought quieted down. Elora smiled too wide. I didn't move. I wasn't giving her the stage, but she took it anyway. "I have a plan," she announced, lifting a manila folder from her oversized purse. I stepped closer and said, "A plan for what? This is my housewarming, not a strategy meeting." She ignored that, flipping open the folder and pulling out sheets of paper she'd printed. That alone pissed me off. She'd come prepared, premeditated, confident. "Since Bentley needs a yard and stability," she began, "and since you have all this unused space, Dario and I came up with a solution that benefits everyone." I crossed my arms and squared my shoulders, making it clear I wasn't going to entertain whatever this was. But she didn't back off. If anything, she straightened up like she expected applause. "You transfer the deed to us," she said, like she was asking for a cup of sugar. "It makes the most sense. A young family needs a home more than a single man does." The room went dead quiet. Dario stepped up beside her, hands in his pockets, like he was here to negotiate the merger of 2 companies. "Your mortgage isn't crazy," he said, nodding toward me. "It's doable. And we already mapped out how we'll use the rooms." I cut him off instantly. "You're talking like you own the place." Dario smiled like I was being dramatic. We're being practical. You're a grown man with extra rooms. Your nephew actually needs the space. Elora placed another sheet on the coffee table. Here's how it works. You transfer the house to us, and then you can rent the basement apartment we'll finish. It'll be perfect for you. The confidence in her voice made something hot crawl up the back of my neck. I stepped in closer, lowering my voice but not softening it. I'm not renting a damn thing from either of you. I bought this house. I renovated every inch of it myself. Elora waved that off like it didn't matter. Yes, you worked hard. But stability for a child is more important than your pride. Then the numbers came out. Elora pointed to a page with highlighted lines. The mortgage is, what, around $1,100 a month? I didn't answer. Dario stepped forward. We can contribute $400. Maybe $450 when things are good. You'd cover the rest since you make more. I laughed once, sharp and loud. You want me to give you my house and pay most of the mortgage? Elora didn't even blink. It's not giving. It's contributing to your family. You're choosing money over blood if you say no. I didn't hold back this time. You don't get to guilt trip me in my own living room. Elora tried to hold eye contact, but mine didn't budge. She looked away first. Across the room, Donald cleared his throat, stepping forward like he wanted to seem neutral. Let's just hear both sides. I cut him off. There aren't two sides. There's my house, and there's them trying to take it. Paris stepped in quickly, hands raised like she was some referee. Lucian, honey, stay calm. Your sister is just trying to solve a problem. No need to get so tense. I stared at her. She made up a problem, and her solution is stealing my home. Alonzo stood up from the couch, arms crossed. This isn't a negotiation. This is theft with extra steps. Dario snorted and puffed up. You don't understand how housing law works. I read that if you have extra rooms and you're refusing to help family, a court can... Alonzo laughed, sharp and humorless. That's not a law. That's something you saw online. Dario's eyes flicked like he'd been caught cheating on a test. It's a thing courts look at. Neglect. Stop! I snapped. Don't pretend you know anything about law. You downloaded one PDF and now you think you're a judge. Elora's face tightened. So you hate your nephew? That's what this is? You'd rather let him grow up in an apartment with no yard than support us? You're heartless. And I stepped closer, towering over her. Don't use your kid as a shield. This is about you wanting something I earned. The room stayed quiet for a beat, everyone waiting to see what I'd do next. Elora looked around like she expected someone to back her up. No one did. Not even the random guests she dragged in. I pointed at the door. All of you, get out, now. Elora gasped like I'd slapped her. You're kicking out your own family? Yes, I said. Before you try stealing anything else. Dario muttered something under his breath but didn't try to argue. Donald looked stunned. Paris covered her mouth, but I didn't care. Alonzo stepped beside me like a wall. I opened the door wider. Out! And one by one, they left. That was the moment the house stopped feeling safe. And it was only the beginning. The morning after I kicked everyone out, my phone started lighting up before I even got out of bed. At first, I thought it was Alonzo checking in. No, it was Elora. A wall of messages filled the screen. Paragraphs, voice notes, screenshots of things I never said, and long guilt trips written like she was auditioning for some dramatic monologue. She didn't even try to hide the insults. You're not a real man if you can't help your own family. You only care about money. You're cold and selfish. Bentley deserves better than an uncle like you. She jumped between threatening me, crying digitally with sad emojis, and lecturing me about what it means to be a brother. There was no break between messages, just constant notifications. Then Dario started. His tone wasn't angry. It was smug, like he thought my reaction last night was just a minor setback. Let us know when you're ready to have a mature conversation. We can work out the rent terms when you calm down. I'll start looking at contractors for the basement. Don't worry, I'll pick affordable ones. He texted like he already owned the place. I blocked his number. He found another one to text me from. He even emailed me a list of suggested improvements he wanted me to start before they transitioned in. I didn't respond to either of them. By noon, Elora switched strategies and moved the fight public. She posted on social media about how I kicked out a mother and her baby in front of witnesses and how I value empty rooms more than family. People who didn't know the situation were commenting hearts and "Stay strong mama" under her posts. She even posted a couple photos from inside my house. In the comments, some of the people she brought tagged themselves and each other like it was a normal get-together instead of an ambush. I wasn't surprised she twisted it. I was surprised how fast people believed her. Around 3, Donald called. I expected him to start with something rational, at least acknowledging how insane the night before was. Instead, he sighed like I had caused all of it. Lucian, can't you just apologize and talk to your sister? She's hurting. She's not hurting, I said. She's angry she didn't get her way. He brushed that aside. You know how emotional she gets. Don't escalate it. Then Paris called. I sent both of them screenshots, proof, actual text and voice messages where Alora called me heartless, and Dario acted like he had already moved in. Paris still minimized it. Donald broke in with, "You're being prideful, son. You always get stuck in your ways. Just be the bigger person." I almost laughed. She tried to take my house. How am I the problem? Neither of them answered that. That night, Alonzo came over. I showed him every message. He didn't sugarcoat anything. "This is harassment," he said. "You need to document everything. Screenshots, timestamps, all of it. And upgrade your security. People like this don't stop just because they're embarrassed." Something in Alora's tone felt unstable, like she'd convinced herself she was owed something. So I installed exterior cameras the next morning. Doorbell cam, backyard cam, new locks, motion lights. Nothing fancy, but enough to let me sleep better. I stopped opening the door unless I checked the camera first. They recorded to the cloud, which made me feel a little safer, but most of what they captured at night was shape and motion, not clean faces. When Donald and Paris heard about the cameras, they acted like I'd bought attack dogs. "You're escalating," Donald said. "You're treating your sister like a criminal," Paris added. "This is unnecessary." "No," I said. "This is protection." They didn't accept that. Family gatherings changed fast. I stopped going, and the relatives who only knew Alora's version started acting like I had committed a crime. I got texts from cousins repeating her lines. "Family shouldn't fight over a house. You could have handled it differently." She just wants stability for her child. No one cared that the stability she wanted was built off the work I put in. Alone. Over years. Even worse, word spread that I exploded at the party, as if raising my voice after someone demanded ownership of my home was an unreasonable reaction. Dario told people I threatened him, which never happened. I didn't threaten to hurt him. I didn't make some violent promise like he told people. I shut him down and told him to get out. That's it. By the end of the week, it felt like half my family had turned into Alora's echo chamber. Alonzo stayed consistent, though. Every day he reminded me not to get pulled into emoji-filled traps or manipulative messages. He told me to save everything and stay calm externally. "People like them use chaos as leverage," he said. "Don't give them more." I tried. But every day felt like a new level of disrespect. A new accusation. A new attempt to make me feel guilty for not handing over something I built with my own hands. I had a work trip already planned for the following week. It should have been a simple 3-day conference out of state. Instead, I left with tension sitting heavy in my chest. As I locked the door behind me the morning I left, I stared back at the house. My house. For the first time since buying it, I didn't feel excited or proud when I looked at it. I felt uneasy. Something was coming, and I could feel it. I was halfway through the second day of my work trip when my phone rang with an unknown number. Normally, I ignore those, but something told me to pick up. A calm voice introduced himself as someone from the fire department in my town. He said my address, then said the words I never expected to hear. "There's been a fire at your property." For a second, everything around me disappeared. My laptop screen, the conference room, the notebook in front of me, gone. My first instinct wasn't even fear. It was disbelief. I asked if they had the wrong address. They didn't. I grabbed my bag, told my supervisor I had an emergency, and got in my car. The drive back was a blur. I can't even remember the roads. Just the pressure in my chest building the closer I got to home. Alonso called because one of my neighbors had his number from helping me with the deck. "They're saying your place is on fire," he said. "I'm heading over right now." When I finally pulled onto my street, I saw the flashing lights first. Fire trucks, police cars, a few neighbors standing outside in their jackets. And then I saw it. My house. Or what was left of it. The entire right side was blackened. The windows were blown out. Smoke was still drifting from the roof. My stomach dropped so hard I felt lightheaded. But what hit even harder was seeing Donald and Paris standing with 2 officers, talking fast and waving their hands like they were defending someone. Before I even spoke to anyone, Paris hurried up to me. "Lucian, honey, don't panic. These things happen." "These things?" I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "My house is destroyed." Donald stepped in quickly. "We don't know what caused it yet, so don't go accusing anybody. Fires start accidentally all the time." I hadn't accused anyone. They were saying it before I even processed the scene. One of the fire investigators approached me. He introduced himself, asked if I was the owner, and started walking me through what they observed so far. His tone was professional but firm. They considered the fire suspicious. The point of origin looked intentional. There were signs someone had been near the side entrance recently. When they asked about cameras, I pulled up the clips. The footage showed a figure cutting across the edge of the yard toward the side entrance. Hood up, head down, nothing you could positively ID from a grainy night clip. Then the feed dropped, like something disrupted the power or the router, and minutes later the fire started. Then Paris said, "Just remember our daughter lives nearby." She would never do anything like this. The investigator looked confused. "Ma'am, we didn't mention any suspects." That told me everything. The police asked to speak with me. They led me to the back of a cruiser where it was quieter. They asked about conflicts, recent threats, anyone who might have a motive. I opened my phone and showed them everything. Alora's long messages, Dario's smug texts, the public posts, even the housewarming chaos. "That's a lot," the officer said. "I know. Do you have the names of the people who were at the housewarming?" "Not all," I said. "She brought strangers, but she posted about it, and they tagged themselves in the comments. I screenshotted everything. They took photos of my phone screen, asked follow-up questions, and wrote down everything carefully. When I walked back toward the curb, I noticed Alora standing a few feet away with her arms crossed, eyes red like she'd been crying. She wasn't being questioned. She wasn't upset about the fire. She looked upset I was giving the police information. The moment she saw me, she went straight into performance mode. "I can't believe you're letting them think I had anything to do with this," she said, voice trembling. "I'm your sister. I'm a mother. Why would I ever hurt you?" I didn't say she did anything. I didn't imply it, but she responded like she was already accused. Dario stood beside her, trying to look composed. "You need to be careful what you're saying to officers," he told me. "You're emotional. You don't want to create a false version of events." I stared at him. I told them the truth. He swallowed hard. "Just don't let anger cloud your judgment." That was rich coming from a guy who tried to claim my house 2 weeks earlier. Alonzo finally arrived and came straight to my side. "You good?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "Not even close." He stayed there, a solid presence, while Donald and Paris hovered on the other side of the yard. I overheard Donald telling an officer, "My daughter would never do this. She's a caring person. Whoever told you otherwise is exaggerating." The officer replied, "Sir, we're gathering facts. We haven't been told anything specific." Paris kept glancing at me like I was the one causing the fire by cooperating. When another investigator approached me to ask clarifying questions, Donald stepped forward like a defensive lawyer. "Do you need to keep asking him things? He's upset. Maybe save it for later." I said, "Dad, let them do their job." Paris looked at me like I betrayed her. The questioning continued. More evidence collected. More officers walking around the property. Every few minutes, someone would ask me another question about timeline or motive. Each time, Alora and Dario got more tense. Eventually, one officer pulled me aside and spoke quietly. "I'm not saying anything officially yet, but the pattern of damage and the timing lines up with someone who knew you weren't home." My jaw clenched. I didn't say a word. When I glanced back at my parents, they were huddled around Alora like they were comforting the victim, her. By the time the firefighters cleared out and the scene was secured, it was obvious. The evidence pointed toward Alora, and my parents weren't just refusing to see it, they were already preparing their defense. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. A week after the fire, the police called me early in the morning and asked me to come in. I sat in a small room with an investigator and a detective, both of them looking serious but calm. They laid out the findings. Accelerant traces near the back entrance, shoe prints matching a brand Alora wore, my cloud footage showing a hooded figure moving toward the side entrance before the feed dropped, a neighbor's camera catching her car near my street at a time she claimed she was home, and the history of threats leading up to the fire. When they said the words, "We're issuing charges," something in my chest tightened. Not satisfaction, not fear, just the weight of everything becoming real. Alora was arrested later that afternoon. I didn't hear the news from the police. I heard it from Donald, who called me in a panic, breathing hard like someone had died. "Lucian, what did you do?" he demanded. "They came to her house and took her away in handcuffs. She's married. She has a child." "I didn't do anything," I said. "They arrested her based on evidence." "You could have stopped it," he shouted. "You should have told them this was a misunderstanding. Families don't destroy each other like this." My jaw clenched. "She burned my house down." Paris cut into the line, crying loudly. She made a mistake. She wasn't thinking clearly. She's under stress. You know how fragile she is. She has a baby. How could you let this happen to her? How could she do this to me? I replied. Paris sobbed harder. You can still fix it. You can retract your statements. Tell them you exaggerated. Clarify the timelines. Say you're unsure. Anything. Just help your sister before her whole life is ruined. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I told the truth. I'm not lying for anyone. Donald's voice dropped, cold and sharp. You are ruining this family. No, I said. Elora did that. He hung up. 2 hours later, Dario posted on social media, claiming she was unjustly targeted and betrayed by her own brother who hates mothers and doesn't understand family loyalty. His followers ate it up. He painted her as a victim of a cruel system and an even crueler sibling. Then Dario messaged me from a new number, trying to sound tough. You crossed the line, man. Fix this. Drop everything or things are gonna get bad. I ignored it. He sent another. I mean it. Don't underestimate me. Still ignored. That evening, I stepped out of my car in my driveway, what was left of it, when I heard someone walk up behind me fast. I turned just in time to see Dario rushing toward me, with his jaw clenched and fists balled. You think you're some kind of hero? He snapped. You think you're gonna win? You're nothing without family. Nothing. Before he could grab me, I shoved him backward. He stumbled but came right back, swinging sloppily. I sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and pinned him against the hood of his own car. He struggled, but he wasn't strong. He fought like a man who thought bluster was enough. You want to try that again? I said through my teeth. Alonzo pulled into the driveway right then and saw the whole thing. He got out, ready if needed, but he didn't have to lift a finger. I had Dario completely locked. Get him off your property and call the cops, Alonzo said. Dario tried one more weak shove, so I released him with a hard push that sent him stumbling several feet back. He tripped, caught himself, then pointed at me with a shaking hand. You'll regret this, he hissed. You're destroying our family. Your family destroyed itself, I said. Now get off my property. He scurried to his car and peeled out like a teenager who just lost a fight he started. Alonzo walked over. You okay? I'm fine, I said. He won't be back. You know he tried to put on a tough guy act, right? Alonzo said. You barely touched him. Guy fights like a wet sock. For the first time in weeks, I almost cracked a smile. The next few days were worse with Donald and Paris. They stopped pretending to be neutral. Every call was another attempt to twist my arm. Just tell the court you misunderstood. Think about Bentley. He needs his mother. Why are you doing this? Why are you being cruel? Each time I gave the same answer. I'm not lying. Paris cried every call. Donald yelled every call. Both blamed me for everything. But Alonzo stayed steady through all of it. You're not doing this to her, he kept reminding me. She did it to herself. She's responsible for her choices. You're just telling the truth. That's what kept me grounded. Facts don't change because people cry about them. As the case moved forward, my parents got colder. Shorter texts, shorter calls, more accusations. It didn't take long before the tone shifted from begging to resentment, like they hated me for not sacrificing myself for Elora the way they expected. One night, after another message from Paris calling me heartless, I finally understood something that should have been obvious long ago. I wasn't losing a sister. I was losing my parents too. Court wasn't quick. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't anything like what people imagine. It was paperwork, waiting rooms, phone calls, meetings with attorneys, and short hearings where everything felt heavier than the time allowed to discuss it. But eventually the case moved forward, and eventually the truth boxed Elora in from every angle. The plea deal came down midsummer. The charge she pled to wasn't the maximum they could have hit her with. Because the house was unoccupied and she had no prior record, the prosecutor offered a deal that guaranteed restitution and kept it out of a trial. The judge suspended jail time on the condition she paid, complied, and stayed clean, and warned her once on the record that one violation would flip it into a sentence. She took it. No dramatic speech, no final attempt to deny anything, no big emotional breakdown. Just a quiet admission to the charges because the evidence was too clear to fight. Guilty. Her sentence included probation, mandatory counseling, community service, and something that actually mattered: court-ordered restitution. She owed tens of thousands in damages. The number wasn't random. It was tied to the fire investigation, the insurance assessment, and the cost of the destruction she caused. The restitution was structured in a long-term payment plan she couldn't avoid: wage garnishment, tax return seizures, financial restrictions. It was the only time the court felt like it recognized what I'd lost. On top of that, insurance compensated me, and they didn't play around. They covered temporary housing, loss of personal property, structural rebuilding estimates, debris removal, and part of the replacement cost for items I'd bought during renovations. They didn't hand me one giant check. The early money covered temporary housing and immediate losses. The bigger portion came down to a choice: rebuild and claim full replacement value, or negotiate a final settlement and walk away. It wasn't easy to get through the paperwork, and I argued with an adjuster more than once, but the payout came through. Enough to recover, not enough to forget. The remains of the house were inspected, photographed, documented, and then cleared. After the insurance settlement was finalized, and it was clear I wasn't rebuilding on that lot, I sold the land to a small development company. Let them deal with whatever came next. I didn't want to set foot on that property again. Meanwhile, child services got involved through the court automatically. Any parent who commits arson, especially against family, ends up flagged. They evaluated Bentley's living conditions, scheduled supervised visits, required parental classes. It was a mess, and none of it was my doing. But somehow, in my parents' eyes, it was all still on me. The day of Alora's sentencing, Donald and Paris stood outside the courthouse waiting for me. Paris had tears streaking down her face. Donald looked like he aged 10 years. Neither of them looked at me the way a parent looks at a son, more like someone who ruined their carefully arranged world. Paris stepped forward first. "Lucian, enough is enough," she said, voice shaking. "She's had her punishment. Please stop now." "Stop what?" I asked. "I'm done. The court handled it." "You didn't have to push it this far," she cried. "She's married. She has a child. He needs stability." I stared at her, stunned she could say that with a straight face. He needed stability before she set my house on fire. Paris flinched like I slapped her. Donald stepped in. "You got your compensation. You got your payout. You're starting over anyway. Just drop the hostility. Let her rebuild." "You think compensation fixes everything?" I asked. "You think money replaces the place I spent months rebuilding? Or the feeling of being hunted in my own family?" "You're being cruel," Paris whispered. "No," I said. "I'm being honest. Something you two haven't been with me in a long time." Their faces hardened. Not because they disagreed, but because they were finally hearing what they never wanted acknowledged. It didn't end there. They tried one more angle. "Do it for Bentley," Paris pleaded. "He needs his family." "He has family," I said. "Just not me." That was it. No yelling, no long speech, just the final truth. I walked away while they stood frozen on the courthouse steps. That night, I blocked Alora, Dario, and then, after sitting with it long enough, Donald and Paris. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was survival. You can't keep people in your life who would watch your home burn and then blame you for the smoke. 2 months after the court case closed, the last part of the insurance settlement finished processing. I had enough to either rebuild or relocate. I chose neither of those old paths. Instead, I took a job offer from a branch of my company 3 states away. Better pay, better weather, better distance. I packed what little I had left, most of my belongings were gone in the fire, and moved into a clean, quiet apartment with new walls that didn't carry old echoes. Unloading the last box, Alonzo clapped me on the back. "Feels like the first normal chapter you've had in a long time," he said. He was right. There was no celebration, no victory lap, no dramatic rebirth. Just quiet. The kind of quiet a man notices only after years of noise he thought he had to tolerate. I found a rhythm again. Work. Sleep. Small routines that involved my life and no one else's demands. The first time I cooked in the new kitchen, I didn't think about who might knock on my door or who might demand something from me. Months later, sitting on my new couch, I thought about something that had stuck with me my entire life. The label my family always put on me. The strong one. People think that's praise. It isn't. Being the strong one was just their excuse to take from me and assume I'd never break, never complain, never need anything in return. Now I'm not their strong one anymore. I'm just a man living in peace, far away from people who mistook my stability for something they could drain. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.